We will begin this meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. If you all would please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, the first item is approval of the minutes of the previous meeting, and we do have these minutes right in front of us.
Yes, we do. So moved.
Okay, motion by Ammons, seconded by Marlin. Any additions or corrections? There are two, May 18th and May 25th. If no additions or corrections, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carries. We have some additions to the agenda. Would someone like to make a motion for that?
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we add 2 items to our agenda: a Kickapoo Trail, Rail Trail presentation, Champaign County Forest District Preserve District, and a budget overview discussion.
Second.
Okay, motion by Robert, seconded by Marlin. Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carries. Okay, the Kickapoo Rail Trail presentation. Dan Olson.
Good evening, everyone. First of all, I want to thank Mayor Pressing and all of you for giving us some time in the midst of a very busy time for all of you. I want to do a couple of quick introductions. To my right here is Mary Ellen Woolner. She's the Deputy Director of the Forest Preserve District. Over my left shoulder is Jonathan Hasselbring, who is new to the Champaign County Forest Preserve District as a planner. So we're here to basically do 3 things tonight. 1, to run you through an update. It's been a long, long time, I think, since we've had communications with this board about what's going on with the rail trail. And 2, to answer any of your questions that you may have up to this point. We hope you're all on board with the rail trail. It should be coming your way very soon. We've got a lot of work to do, but I want to give you a little bit of background, a little bit of statistics, and then ultimately this is to invite you, all of you, to be participants in master planning that will be coming up very soon. We hope you can do that. So to give you a little bit of background, go ahead. Rail trails are nothing new. If you, hopefully all that's up on your monitors there. Nothing new, and as a matter of fact, there's some pretty unbelievable statistics out there nationally. There's over 1,906 rail trails around the nation with 22,000 miles of trails, and some of those are over 200 miles long. 200 miles didn't happen all at once. It got phased in. We want to talk to you tonight a little bit about the phasing in that'll happen. Right here closer to home in Illinois, you might be surprised to hear that there's actually 75 different rail trails that are open, and these are trails that were once rail lines and converted to multi-use paths in the state of Illinois. 850 miles, and as you can see, a lot of projects, including the Kickapoo Rail Trail that's on to be completed, with another 175 potential miles in all those. Now, when this endeavor first started, it was a new concept in the nation, and now we get questions as to why Champaign, Urbana, and the whole counties don't have a rail trail yet. So I think things have moved along very quickly over the last 20 years. Another very vital and important thing, those of you that know and use parks and recreation all over the state, hopefully, we have seen time and time again that trails come to the top of the needs and wants list for individuals here in the county. We did a countywide survey. It finished up at the end of 2014, and by far trails were the first thing that was mentioned on the needs list. Go ahead. Now I want to take you through a little bit of a whirlwind tour of how this all started, because I don't know if everybody knows, But essentially, it started off with a protection of some prairie areas by Dave Monk with Heartland Pathways, who some of you may know. And there's plenty of vital natural areas out there to protect, so, and they're still in existence today. A little bit of a side note, back when this started, basically the Illinois Department of Natural Resources had a recommendation that a certain number of acres in the county that should be green space. And right now, although there are nice forest preserves out there, we still need about 2.5 times the amount of open space that we have in order to meet those standards that the IDNR recommends. From 1990 to 2005, a lot of things happened, as you can see there. One of the biggest partners on this is the Champaign County Design and Conservation Foundation. They are still a vital partner today. And really, they started off fundraising in the mid-1990s and got a substantial amount of money. Over those years, you might ask what was going on. Well, some of us joke that the rail line was actually purchased 3 times, but for some reason the purchase was taken out from under the CCDC at the time, I think, and sold to different railroad companies. So from 2005, go ahead, to 2011, we really started getting teeth, and that's where you may have started seeing a lot more news in the newspaper about who was going to be in charge of this. So we met up with some agreements between us, the Vermilion County Conservation District, and the Illinois Department of Natural Resources, and the trail is owned now by those 3 entities. The Illinois Department of Natural Resources felt this was such a vital project that they jumped in and have helped with cost, helped with design and everything in the process. And it still continues to be one of the IDNR's biggest projects to date. You're fine. Mary Ellen here went into a grant writing frenzy, and if you may recall that she was successful in getting a grant for construction on the Vermilion County side in December 2012. And yes, that was before the land was actually owned for the rail trail, which tells you a little bit about how much the IDNR really wanted this trail to occur. So as you see up there, over time, we got the land and also got a second construction grant. Now, interestingly, the Phase East 1 and the Phase West 1 we'll talk about in a little while, because the Phase West 1 is what you should all be interested in here today. We went into a pretty big visioning process and a little bit about the project itself. The entire rail line is 24.5 miles long, runs from Urbana to Danville. We're looking at probably a $12 to $14 million project when it's all said and done. We've got some very iconic bridges in there over the Vermilion and Salt Fork rivers that are, fairly hefty price tag. We do have, I want to mention later on, the foundations that are involved here. And again, I want to point out that the IDNR owns a small section of it in Vermilion County. They do own the very large trestle bridge that you can see on 150 as you go down there. They took that burden on for the long haul, and they own it, and it's still very structurally sound and will be equipped to handle pedestrian traffic. The visioning process was quite neat. We've had Ratio Architects take this kind of image, and this is Main Street St. Joseph, and turn it into what is a very elaborate downtown St. Joseph. And this Phase 1 West that we talked about includes Main Street and St. Joseph. They also included some vision for this very large trestle bridge that's about 3/4 of a mile long and 90 feet off the river. And with their visioning, matched it up with what's happening around the country. So this is a place that people will come visit and can be educated, get physical exercise, and be with family. That takes us into the last couple of years. Three foundations have been working extremely hard. You've probably seen in the news lately about some very large donations from local businesses especially. Additionally, what came out of this was we were very surprised at how many groups came out of the woodwork and said, we want to help you do this. Everything from just wine tastings to the big long week of what Champaign County Bikes was involved in last week. And right now, May 2015 has been the largest fundraising month for the Kickapoo Rail Trail in its entire time. And I think we're probably talking close to $90,000 for the last 30 days on this. So a lot of great support from the community, which we're very thankful for. A little bit about the engineering. This engineering is being done here in town by Fair Graham. Phase 1 East and Phase 1 West, again, West 1 being our big one here in Champaign, will most likely be completed by the end of 2015, and that's very good news. Then Farnsworth Group is going to pick up the construction engineering, and potentially it could start at any time, and we'll go over some dollar amounts in a moment to see what that does. Now, the most important thing is that the engineering gets us the footprint of the trail. It does not engineer any amenities out. We'll talk about that in a moment. Also, just so you know, we've done some great branding for the Kickapoo Rail Trail, which has helped with the fundraising. We've got all sorts of stuff out there. There's T-shirts and all the usual stuff. We even have a Kickapoo Rail Trail root beer, if you're interested, that Homer Soda Company helped us put together. And then the big reason we're probably here tonight is to talk a little bit about master planning. What it looks like right now is our master planning could be bid out by the end of this year. And that's going to get us not just it won't worry about the footprint of the trail, that's the engineering that's taking place now, but it will get us the amenities like parking lots and ADA accessibility, restrooms and all the good stuff, especially interpretation. You will be invited to that as a council, and the entire trail, both Champaign County side and Vermilion County side, will be planned all at once. So it'll be a big collaboration, and maybe we can have a couple of public input meetings here at this building. And I really want to stress that your participation is vital. If you take a look back for a moment on the pictures that are down there, the most popular trails in the United States are those that local councils and local villages and local business people really embrace, and they want to interpret everything, and that's a really good thing. We need to explain why railroads are there, why agriculture exists in this part of the world, and why nature exists too. So there's plenty of good opportunity here that we're hoping to get some input from. A little bit about donations to date. I think this tells you a lot about the community we're living in. First of all, I'll just get right to the highlighted point there, is that there's been about $295,000 donated to the Kickapoo Rail Trail at this time. And as you can see, it's a split between individuals, but really individuals have stepped up quite a bit. We are hearing now more often from businesses that are giving, and we greatly appreciate that. So a lot of stuff here on this page, but this is why we're here tonight, to show you that essentially enough grants have been written and enough matching donations have been received to possibly start Phase East 1, now that's Vermilion County, to go ahead and get that started as soon as engineering is done, and we hope that'll happen. Now, the phase here in Urbana is, I should say Urbana up there, but that's Champaign County is what we're going with. Phase West 1, we're still looking at about a $418,000 donation shortfall at this point in time. We do believe the money can be raised fairly quickly. We do think there are some large donors still out there to date, and if you know anybody, let us know. And as you can see, we've got 5 different construction phases there that'll occur A little note there at the bottom, if you are interested, we do have, actually the Forest Preserve has 3 grants that are currently frozen by the governor's office. One of them is $200,000 for this trail, and it happens to be part of the money that would be in this first construction phase. So you can see how vital it is to get that money released. At this point, I'll go ahead and conclude with any questions. What I've done with the other villages along the route is brought some specific maps laying out where our ownership is, if you want to see that, or I can come back and do that specifically at any other time.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Aaron?
For the property along the rails, is this all, how much of it is private property? How much of it is public? Is it the rail companies own not just the rails, the rail lines, but the property just right next to it on each side? How does that work?
Yeah, so we purchased straight from what the rail company owned. So in Urbana, it's highly variable as to what that width is, but it's never over 100 feet in Urbana, over 100 feet wide. So we've said on average it's 100 feet along the entire 24-mile trail, but there are some places, especially in the more urbanized area, where that gets down to 40 feet, to be honest. So it's variable. Now, it does abut right next to most residents along the route, also along 150. So you can envision 150, and then our ownership, and then private ownership is very, very close.
So what is the feedback and participation with the private owners? Are you getting any concerns? Just talk about that a little bit, would you?
Yeah, I think we haven't received a whole lot of concerns. I think most people, and when they see them, if they know what they are, it's essentially like a sidewalk, although ours will be crushed limestone chip. It's essentially like a sidewalk going through around your neighborhood is what it's very equivalent to. We have heard a lot of good support for having it. We have had some concern come up, and I think a lot of the concern has been, where is that property boundary?
Right.
And as we go forward, we'll lay that out pretty specifically for everyone.
And how do you delineate what will be the marker? Is there a fence or something that says this is the private property and this is the trail?
Yeah, in most cases around the country, there's no distinguishing line. There's no boundary markers, typically no fences. People can put up fences, obviously, if they prefer, but the majority of the trails in the United States don't have fences from the residents, believe it or not. So, yeah.
Well, I guess we don't have a bunch of livestock and all that kind of stuff through that.
Right.
There's got to be some, though, in that 24 miles.
There's, believe it or not, I don't think there's, well, there is one area in Vermilion County. Now, the majority of it, though, is row crop agriculture right next to it. And we are a little lucky in that 150 runs along it for, quite a while. So the ownership is 150 and then the rail trail. So,
Thank you.
Eric?
So I moved to, I'm reminded by your presentation that at a recent visit to New York City, I was able to walk the High Line.
Yep.
And so I don't know if any other people have, but that's a really inspiring example of the upside possibilities, and makes me believe that your visualizations could really come true.
Yeah, thank you.
Dennis?
Which is the railroad company that you've been interacting with to purchase the line?
Which railroad company?
Yeah, is it
CSX
CSX?
Yeah.
Okay.
was the final company.
Mhm. All right. So when it comes into Urbana, I mean, I'm assuming that the goal in the future would be to go through Urbana and onto Mahomet would be a wonderful connectivity route. Have you worked with the Norfolk Southern line? I mean, have you had interaction with them or the leaders of that line?
We haven't yet, no.
Do you
But,
plan to?
I think, Dennis, that's a very good point. We've been talking with Champaign Park District, Urbana Park District, and that line does continue all the way out, clear it could go clear to Mahomet, which
Yeah.
sounds like an incredible vision, but it's happened everywhere.
Right. So I would really like to see, I guess, a commission or a committee formed to interact with the rail ownership going through Urbana, because the connectivity through the city to Champaign and beyond connects about 7 to 8 key businesses, the hospitals, Parkland College, Brookins Institute, northern section of the University of Illinois, downtowns, Champaign and Urbana. So it'd be a great, I mean, I know that you've got a lot on your plate so far, but to broaden the perspective and to continue the rail line, I would love to see a group of the leadership in the development of your project encourage members who are leaders in this community to come forward to start approaching property owners and the rails. And if you've had good experience working with CX, whatever it was,
CSX.
maybe you have the language that would also then, you would have maybe the gravitas to like actually approach the railroad line in this community with enough energy to maybe have a real down-to-earth talk about a line that's mostly vacated now. I mean, it has really intermittent service and could easily become converted to another pathway area. It would really benefit this community.
Anyone else? Charlie?
Yeah. To add to that, if anybody needs to see what a trail can do, they can just go over to Bloomington Normal and ride the Constitution Trail there, where people's property values have all gone up, where they're located next to the trail. And when people put a house for sale, they make sure they put a sign. If they're on the trail, they put a sign on the trail. It's, you know, next to the trail, so people know that their house is for sale there. A lot of people ask me, what role is there for volunteers, in particular volunteers willing to do some heavy lifting and actually work on building the trail itself?
Yeah, we haven't explored that quite yet. The construction will be pretty heavy construction, but we will always have the need for volunteers. We already have in place at our other trails, trail stewardship programs, which are everything from, you know, branch removal to vandalism help and eyes and everything else. So we haven't had the real big discussions on the heavy lifting part yet, Charlie, to be honest. So hopefully we will very soon. I think there will always be a need, and we'll get to there. We'll get to there for sure.
Well, I have some friends that are ready to get out there with chainsaws, so
Yeah.
they're willing to do the heavy stuff too.
Yeah. We appreciate that.
Bill?
I was curious about the choice of Fairgram for the engineering. Do they have experience in other rail trail projects? Do they?
I don't believe, you may better here.
Yeah. Fairgram was chosen to be the design engineer. None of the engineers here locally, at least those that submitted proposals to do any of the engineering work, have done work on this, a rail trail of this scope. All of them have done work on smaller trails in parks and urban areas, 3 miles here, 5 miles there. I think this is going to be a new project. Fairgram is doing, as Dan said, Fairgram is completing the design engineering work. Farnsworth Group will actually be overseeing the construction engineering, so we'll have 2 different engineers in this project. We think that both of them were very qualified to do this work, but no, neither one of them has done a trail of this magnitude before.
Thanks.
Diane?
I assume people have quantified the economic benefits of the recreation and tourism from this. Is there a place people can go to get information like that, or?
Thanks, Diane. Yes. One of the big things that we have been out, and when we're talking to the businesses about the rail trail, is there are tools now that we didn't have 10 years ago on rail trails. And I chose to take it out of tonight's presentation for time, but we've done entire presentations on benefits to rail trails. On the slide that's up right now, on the Rails to Trails Conservancy is an absolutely wonderful group, and on their site they have an entire library on legal issues with trails, on the economic impact of trails, on health and wellness impacts on trails. I'd come back and talk about that any time. It's something Mary Ellen and I have been working on for quite a while. So the railstotrails.org is the place to go for that information. One of the other places that is here more locally, local to the state of Illinois, is there's a Trails for Illinois. A fellow by the name of Steve Buchtel has done research on the trails in Illinois and looked at the economic impact. And some of his recent research was done more along the collar counties of Illinois, but one of the stats that stood out to me is that per individual, per visit is, they're spending about $30.20 per visit. And that's a pretty big impact. Now those may be individuals coming in, buying gas, buying food, buying cycling supplies. It's a whole myriad of things, but the other businesses that have been doing really well around along the rail trails and have been everything from wineries and antique shops too. People stop in and do that. Any place that sells ice cream and pizza seems to have a bigger economic impact. I was recently on one in Pennsylvania that bed and breakfast sat right on the trail, and a third of their business came directly off the trail. They were savvy enough to put ice cream and drinks right there at the front of their bed and breakfast, and now they have entertainment on weekends and things like that. So we're obviously not in that business as the Forest Preserve District, but I think these communities have enough business savvy individuals to take care of that.
Charlie?
Yeah, as someone who regularly leads groups around the county, we all typically drop anywhere from $5 to $15 every time we go out for a 20 to 50 mile ride. I mean, and that's pie, ice cream, breakfast, lunch. You know, bicyclists need to eat. They need water. They need, you know, something to drink. So, you know, the food side of it is, and the luxury food side of it is it can be very welcome. So I know that I know every location where good pie is served in Champaign County and beyond the county, for that matter.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Charlie, when we move on to the next, would you take over the chair? Because I got to do
Yes,
item
okay.
budget overview and
Budget
item
overview,
A.
the executive department.
Yes.
The mayor's going to switch tables. And I see Elizabeth is going to join you. Anyone else from the executive group? Jim's over there. Okay, so executive department presentation by Mayor Pressing and
No, this is
Elizabeth Cannon.
We're going
Or-
to do the overview
Overview
first, and then
first,
I'll do
okay.
the executive department. But I think that Elizabeth and her staff did a really nice job on putting this initial budget together, and it's loose leaf, so when we make changes, which we will, that'll be easy to do. But basically, we have a $47 million budget, and there's some staff reductions, because when we started, we had a $1.5 million gap. So we cut about $500,000, and we have about $1 million in new revenues, excluding the property tax, because we're trying to pick things that would be more acceptable to people who live in Urbana, who are already getting an extra big property tax burden. So we're keeping our property tax rate at $1.34, which would be a decrease from last year. And we're going to do some investments. We've made cuts and we have new revenue, but we're going to invest $300,000 in a new accounting system, a financial management system, because I think that's something that we need, and accounting systems do have to be replaced periodically, and $100,000 for a new work order system for Public Works. And these are going to make our employees be able to work more efficiently and effectively, and I think our system right now is a little hard to understand. Our general fund, we have $32 million in revenues and $33 million in appropriations, but we normally spend about 96%, so this is essentially balanced. And we started out by asking, when we realized what the gap was, we asked departments to reduce their spending by 2%, which, you know, not all of them, some did more, some did less, but that's what the rough average is. So these are the new, we eliminated some positions, about 5, the equivalent of 5 full-time positions, but these were mostly part-time and they were mostly vacant positions. So the budget proposal for increases you have before you tonight, but just for the public record, increase the city gasoline tax, the local gasoline tax, from 4 cents to 5 cents, which would raise $180,000. And that allows us to keep up our repairs but not get it from the general fund. Increase the food and beverage tax from 0.5% to 1%. That would raise $370,000. And many other central Illinois cities are already charging 2%. So we would be half of what many cities have. Then increasing the hotel motel tax from 6 to 7%. And increasing the natural gas use tax from 3.5 cents per therm to 5 cents. And this, as you've heard, is not for regular residential people who are already paying the utility tax, but for big users who are not paying the utility tax because they buy it wholesale. And finally, we have about $250,000 in fee increases, with half that amount going to the general fund. So I will turn it over to Elizabeth.
Okay. As the mayor mentioned, there have been some changes in the budget document. I'm just going to point out a couple of those. You will notice others as you go through it. We did include a column for estimated expenses for the current year on all the pages that have budget detail. And this is one of the ways that we develop a better forecast for the fund balance that is going to carry forward to next year. We will also plan to amend the current budget at the same time that we adopt the new budget to make it conform to those estimates. So that's just a new piece of information that you have. One other thing that's worth mentioning, because this is sort of a significant change, is all of the salaries and benefits related to community development grant programs are now going to be budgeted in the community development special fund. Previously, we tried to budget them according to how we thought people would spend their time, and that never really worked out, and that resulted in budget changes and changes in how people's time was allocated in the payroll system. So we think this will really simplify that for them. So if you notice some positions missing, some places in community development, they're not missing, they've just moved around a little bit. The final document will include some additional information, such as more narrative information about departments that we just didn't have time to include at this point. So it'll be a little bit thicker and more informative, I think. But I would say, as you're looking through the document, if you have any suggestions or requests for, I'd like to see this graph or this piece of information, just shoot me an email, because we will be making changes. In terms of the format, the summary for all funds has been formatted a bit. Detail on budgeted positions is now at the back of the budget book, beginning on page 235. So you can look in one place and you can see for each budget what are the positions and classifications that are included in the budget. In terms of the budget detail pages, there is now a fund statement for each fund in the budget, which summarizes revenues, expenditures, and fund balance. And that will be the first thing that you see for each fund. Following that, in the general fund, there are summaries. Well, there will be revenue detail for each fund, and then a summary for each department that breaks down by program, and then line item detail for each department. You won't see those department summaries outside of the general fund, though. It doesn't really make sense. So let's talk a little bit about the numbers, and this will be a pretty high-level overview. You will talk in more detail about each department's budget as we work through this. So total revenues for all funds in the proposed budget are $44.8 million. And this shows you how, sorry, my mouse doesn't seem to be. This shows you for FY14 actual, the year that just ended, FY15 current year, what we're estimating, and FY16 proposed budget. And you can see that that fluctuates a lot, but primarily that change is not in the general fund, which is shown in the bottom in blue. That's fairly stable. The changes really appear in the other funds, and it's really attributed to, on the revenue side, capital projects where we issued bonds to finance several projects over the last few years, and then other state funds such as grants that we receive for projects, for example, for Windsor Road. And so while it looks like it's decreasing, there's a reasonable explanation for that. Looking at expenditures for all funds, you can see the same sort of pattern. You can see personnel down at the bottom in purple, which is a fairly large chunk. But then at the top, what's really changing the most is capital expenditures. And again, that corresponds to the increases in revenues from bond proceeds and grant funds that were spent on capital projects, which goes from $11.5 million in FY14 to $24 million in FY15, and then down to $7.1 million in the proposed budget. This pie chart shows general fund revenues by source, and the total general fund revenues are about $32.2 million, but you can see that the largest slice of the pie there is sales tax, almost a third, and then property tax followed by income tax. The thing really to take note of here, I think, is that when you look at sales and income tax together, that's about 45% of our total general fund revenues. And those are both revenues that tend to be fairly variable and respond to changes in economic conditions. And so with this mix of revenues, we can expect, and I think we saw this during the recession, that those will fluctuate probably significantly. And that argues for having some reserves on hand to deal with those kind of fluctuations. This pie chart shows general fund expenditures by class, and the total here is $32.7 million, but as you can see, personnel costs are almost 3/4 of the total. This is significant because when we talk about budget reductions, which we have done this year and we may be doing next year as well, it makes it a lot harder to reduce the budget when you're dealing with personnel cost. But that is our biggest cost. We depend on people to deliver the services that our residents need. Also worth noting is interfund transfers are 14% of the total. The general fund provides for funds for a variety of purposes in other funds. So for example, we annually transfer funds for capital improvement, vehicle and equipment replacement, and risk management, as well as other activities that are funded from other funds within our budget. This chart's going to require a little explanation, but we all had talked about the financial forecast a few months ago. So this is my demonstration that we're achieving what we set out to do. So I'm going to say the general fund budget is balanced. Recurring expenditures are about 97% of recurring revenues. We talked about wanting to keep our recurring expenditures at less than 99% of recurring revenues, but in the short time, we need to do more than that because we have issues in other funds that we need to address. So this slide compares 4 columns. It compares FY15 budget and estimate, and then the forecast that we provided to council members several months ago, and the FY16 proposed budget. You can see that the blue line is revenues, or the blue bar is revenues and the purple bar is expenditures. The green line is that 99% goal, where that's where we would like to keep our expenditures at or below. So you can see in the current budget, our expenditures actually exceed our revenues. That's not a good situation. In our estimate, it looks a little bit better, quite a bit better actually, but not quite where we'd like to be. And then in our forecast, we worked the numbers to determine what was our strategy to get to that goal. So you can see that our proposed budget, the column on the right, is actually pretty consistent with our forecast, because we made sure it was by making reductions and requesting revenue increases. And actually we did a little bit better than what we showed in the forecast. I'm also going to explain that squiggly line at the bottom. The bottom of this graph doesn't really start at 0, which is not usually how you want to present financial information. So I'm showing that it's a broken axis to make the point, so it's clear that we're not starting at 0. If we showed the whole bar in here starting at 0, you wouldn't be able to see those differences at the top. They wouldn't be so apparent. So I think that this demonstrates that we accomplished what we set out to do in the budget process. We did find some room to include some additional one-time transfers for capital improvements and equipment replacement. However, because there's some uncertainty in the budget, we would only make those transfers at the end of the year after things are a little more clear in terms of what our financial situation is. So, talking about that, looking ahead, we don't know at this point how the state budget is going to impact our budget. We haven't addressed a potential decrease in revenues from the state income tax at this point, although certainly all of our department heads are aware that that possibility is out there, and they're giving careful consideration to how we might deal with that. That is something that if it happens, we will have to make adjustments to the budget. We do want to, as we move forward from this point, maintain a budget that balances recurring revenue and expense. That's very important for us to have a budget that's sustainable over the long term. We shouldn't be making those decisions, to make it work this year without consideration to the long term. We do need to identify additional funding for capital improvements, and I think Bill did a good job of explaining that. I think it was last week, that we're on a 70-year cycle for major improvements to our roads, which is a little bit shocking. And we do need to resolve some issues in our vehicle and equipment replacement fund that may require additional funding, but there are certainly some other things that we need to look at. We really need to tear that apart, kind of start from 0. So in terms of our plan for reviewing the budget, which we're going to jump into right now, tonight we're going to talk about the executive department, the public works department, and the fire department. Next week we will talk in more detail about finance, police, the library, and community development. And then on June 15th we'll plan to adopt the budget following a public hearing, which will also take place on the same evening. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Diane.
I understand the state recently passed a sales tax on internet sales. Will municipalities see any of that, or is that going to go all into the state coffers?
I mean, yeah, theoretically, since we receive a share of the state income tax, we should see some of that, but I haven't noticed any difference at this point. I think that it was effective in January, if my recollection is correct.
So we haven't seen any estimates of what that
It would be difficult to distinguish from everything else that's happening. I mean, it's a large source of revenue, so it may not be noticeable.
Okay.
Well, sales tax what I'm saying is sales tax fluctuates a lot, even from month to month or from year to year anyhow. So it would be difficult to determine if it's increasing.
Oh, because of the internet.
Whether
Okay.
it's because of that, yeah.
Other questions? General Bill.
Yeah, I know as part of our labor negotiations, one of the things was to set up the health insurance committees, and that was supposed to save money in the long run. I was wondering if there was any savings yet this year or any anticipated savings.
The year that we're in, I think we got 3%. Is that correct? 3% reduction. And that was negotiated by our representative who's been working. So the committee we put no increase in the budget because we're committed to just holding the line on this. And so the committee will figure out how to get to that goal.
Dennis?
One of the proposals I think that we talked about, or perhaps you had mentioned, was a reduction generally in travel budgets for the different departments, and I'm wondering if this budget shows that reduction, or has that happened this year?
Yeah, I think what you're thinking about is the fact that we asked department heads to curtail hiring and out-of-state travel and some capital purchases and other items. And really, that's not reflected in next year's budget. The intent was just to do that until we know the outcome of the state's budget. And then at that point, you know, we may have to make more cuts and those things may become more permanent. So for right now, we're just asking them to sort of hold the line on that.
So in the itemized sections of different departments, when you see line items that have to do with travel budget for departments, that seems to be specified pretty particularly. So I'm just wondering if that had been reduced from previous years, or are you talking about that?
No, not necessarily. I mean, in the process of preparing their budgets, various departments moved money between line items, so we gave them a goal to hit. So in some places that may have gone up, in some places it may have gone down, but we didn't ask for specific reductions in that.
Eric?
Are there any either programs or departments or units that are taking a disproportionately large hit that we should be aware of?
Well, we're going to go through all the department budgets, but the personnel reductions were primarily made in vacant positions.
Okay.
Like I had a vacant position in human relations, so we changed that to a half-time position. So those are the kind of cuts that were made. But as you know, we are in an uncertain situation, so we didn't just cut everything to the bone, which we might have to do if the state reduces some of our revenues and at the same time adds to our expenditures.
Diane?
So every once in a while I get asked what the city has in reserve, the rainy day fund, the fund that we would draw on when the sales tax or the income tax revenue isn't what we want. So I'm assuming on page 15, one of these ending fund balances would be designated as the official city reserves, but I wasn't sure which one that is.
The reserves are the fund balances, and when people talk about rainy days, it's been raining for quite a while here since the recession started.
Well, yeah. The question was even if there is one at this point. So,
Yeah, there's. I think that there was what was called a general reserve fund. I think that was pretty well tapped out at least a couple of years ago, and there was about 100,000 remaining there, which we are going to transfer to fund some capital improvements. It wasn't a significant amount of money. So, I mean, if you think about income tax, that's in the general operating fund. So, with respect to fluctuations in that revenue source, you know, if the state does what the governors propose, we would be looking to make additional cuts, most likely, to deal with that. We do have, there is some cash available in transfers that would be made to other funds that we could, I'm going to say, roll back in order to give us time to work the details out, but that's the most likely scenario.
I have a question then too, since we're looking at general things. A recent internet company, the CEO cut his salary to $75,000 a year and took everything that he saved. He was a multi-million-dollar, I mean, I can get a salary of like $200 million or whatever, and he gave all his employees raises so that everybody made $75,000 a year studies show that that's an amount of money at which there's a balance between sort of money can't buy you happiness sort of thing, and it does. That's sort of like considered, that's where at $75,000 you is a sweet spot. That's a good way to put it. Yeah, so I have to ask the question, what do we save if we freeze all non-union related salaries that are in excess of $75,000?
I haven't looked at that specifically, but we looked at if we freeze management salaries, which is probably pretty close to what you're
Right.
suggesting. I think that number was about 125,000.
Okay, great, thank you. Other questions? Okay, Mayor, if you want to go on to the next topic, please.
Okay, on page 37 is the executive department. And the first thing that caught my eye was the top line on personnel, that our estimate is 302,000 and the budget was 301,000. And if you look on page 38, here's the explanation for that. We have retired health insurance, which should have been budgeted, and that's the if you look at the fifth number down, the sixth number down, that was not budgeted. So when Elizabeth talked about we're going to do a cleanup before or right after we adopt the new budget, we're going to clean up the existing budget. And if you look at that page also, there's no overtime in my budget, so that I'm taking that down to 0. That was just some error that crept into last year's budget. But the main change in overall the executive department, as I said, was in the human relations, where we took a full-time job that was vacant. It was Todd Rent's old job. He moved up to Vasilia Clark's job in human resources, and instead of filling it with a full-time person, we filled it with a half-time person who's very good. But we had to cut somewhere, and we had to cut personnel. So that is the cut that was made in the executive department. And most of the other things, there's not a huge change. Overall, for the administrative department, it was a 2% reduction. And for the whole executive department, it was about that's on page 43, it was 1.49%. So does anybody have any questions about the executive department?
Mike?
Yes.
So when did Vasilia retire?
She retired, her last paycheck was in March. She was using up vacation time. She left in January, and then the last
Right.
check was in March.
Okay, so that was a short-term vacancy, which,
Yeah.
so you'll actually have some savings this year,
Right.
because that'll be a half-time, which I guess, so.
Well, we don't,
You
yeah,
got-
halftime starting now.
So you got 3 months, you had 3 months of savings from her vacancy. Well, I'm sorry.
Not quite that much, because she had unused vacation time.
Well,
Yeah, so we were still paying out money.
through March.
Right.
Okay, so maybe a couple of months,
Right.
where you'll get the equivalent of 6 months, if you have a half-time.
Right, for next
Okay.
year,
Okay.
yeah.
Other questions on this section?
Okay, well, if you get any questions later, just give me a call. Thank you.
Thank you. I assume you're going to take back over?
Sure.
In the meantime, next up is the Urbana Fire Department.
to exit. Okay, this afternoon we sent out a kind of a PowerPoint presentation, just the highlights of our budget. I hope everybody got it, and it's kind of a plain wrapper version. Philip dressed it up a little bit for us, so this will be just a little different than the one that you got. So I'll go ahead and start down through here. I'm going to start out this presentation just getting everybody familiar with the organization of the fire department, because I can't really assume that everybody here knows how our fire department operates. And so we'll start out with this first slide. We're organized into 3 divisions. We've got an administration division, a prevention education division, and an operations division. Okay. First off, the administration division is 2 people. Whoops, you changed it. Okay, and basically it's myself, the fire chief, and I have the overall direction of the fire department, and my jobs are what's listed there. And in addition to this, I usually spend some time every day with each of my operations chiefs, and daily I spend time with my fire marshal and administrative assistant and helping them with their jobs and giving them direction. So all the other administrative functions that aren't listed here are handled by the operations chiefs. Okay, the Prevention and Education Division, that's 2.5 people. We've got Philip Edwards, a fire marshal. We've got the Campus Fire Prevention Officer, which is paid for totally by the U of I contract. And then this last year, we added a commercial fire inspector, half-time. Clay Bear was retiring from as a housing inspector, and as he was going out the door, we grabbed him and said, hey, we really need some help with our commercial inspections. So he's worked out great at 20 hours. Prior to that, we were using a firefighter and a fire officer on overtime to do those inspections. So you'll see later in the presentation, this has been a savings for us. The operations division is the bulk of our people. We have 3 divisions. As you know, we work 3 24-hour shifts. Each division is led by a division chief, and I've got them listed Division 1, 2, and 3, and that's also referred to as Shift 1, 2, and 3. Each division chief has administrative duties because, you know, we basically don't have any 40-hour administrators except the fire chief, and so the duties are broke down as listed. You can see Division 1, his big duties are emergency management, emergency medical, facilities, pre-planning. He also supervises our software program, Firehouse, with all of our fire department records. Each shift consists of 5 company officers, and when you've got a company officer, that's on each apparatus. So every apparatus you see to go down the street has a company officer, and that person's in charge of that apparatus, and that person's in charge of the fire station that apparatus is in. So we've got 5 of those, 4 engines and a ladder truck. There's an engineer to drive each of those and operate each of those vehicles, and then there's 7 firefighters on the shift. 2 of our apparatus has 2 firefighters, and those firefighters are used as vacation, sick leave relief. Whenever people are using benefits, that keeps us up to our minimum staffing. In Division 2, his big job is the training program, which is huge in the fire department. He also writes all of our grants and then manages the grants, and along with the training, develops and implements our incident command training. And the employee development, we test every year for a different position in the fire department, and we're guided by state law and our union contract on how we promote, and so he's responsible for making sure we follow those guidelines. Our Division 3 division chief, he kind of takes care of the nuts and bolts of the fire department and the apparatus and equipment. The personal protective equipment's the fire gear. The breathing apparatus is our air packs. And the special operations teams is the hazmat team, the technical rescue team. So that's the bulk of our operations division. If you notice, Shift 3 has 8 firefighters as opposed to 7, and it seems like we've always got somebody off on sick leave, duty injury, military leave, and years back it's really benefited the fire department to have that person, instead of paying overtime to state as staffing, we have that person that we move around. Okay, to make the fire department function, we do a lot of interaction between the divisions. The Prevention and Education Division, because it's 2.5 people, with one of them full-time on inspections, requires the Operations Division to do a lot of work in the P&E Division. So our firefighters are doing commercial and housing inspections. They do U of I building familiarization tours. The home fire and life safety areas are the Saturday smoke detector checks and home inspections, and they do a lot of public education events. And again, the operations chiefs are interacting, doing administrative duties. And prevention education, they're at all of our fires, and they actually lead the investigation of our fires. Phil takes care of problem properties, and they generally provide support for our operations division. So we kind of have to interact between the divisions to make the fire department work. This slide shows the breakup of our total calls for service for 2014, and that's January 1 to December 31. You can see the big blue part of the pie chart is EMS calls. I mean, 49.98%. That's about as close to half as you can get. We got hazardous conditions falling in behind service calls. Actual fires make up not quite 4% of what we do. So fires are something that we prepare for. It's probably the biggest hazard we got, one of the biggest hazards. But in actuality, between everything else we do, it's one of the things that we actually, as far as working fires, don't have a lot of. And we can probably attribute that to our prevention and education activities we do. Okay, our training report, I won't go into great detail of this because he's included a lot of information in here. Chad Hinch, DC Hinch, is our training officer, but what I do want to point out that the Illinois Department of Labor requires 20 hours of training per month for structural firefighters. In 2014, we averaged 33.8 hours, and total of 23,119 training hours. The training is really important because there's a lot of things that the fire department does that is very low frequency and very high risk. And so you may not get a vertical rescue call but once, maybe twice a year, if that. But when you do a vertical rescue call, that's a very high risk call. So we have to be very proficient at a lot of these skills. And we divide our training up into these areas. I mean, we train 1 week a month on special operations, and we divide that up between technical rescue and hazmat. And again, we do about 2 hours a week on fire training, and then 1 or 2 weeks a month on fire training, and then we commit 1 week to emergency medical training. So we get a lot of training hours. A few of the highlights last year, we always try to do some live fire drills at the Fire Institute. Every year at spring break, we do a high-rise drill with Champagne Fire. And a high-rise, again, is a very high-risk operation. If you go down on campus, we've got a lot of high-rises going up in the air. And so every year that becomes more and more important on how to operate in a high-rise. We got 4 grant-funded trainings for our technical rescue team, which funded the overtime for those trainings. And we trained 9 employees as train-the-trainers with our new technical rescue tools. And with our rescue grant, we were able to purchase curriculum so these 9 folks could train our people. So, okay. If you have any questions about this stuff as I go along, please ask them. Philip will go ahead and take this prevention and education report.
And I have to do this, right? All right. We had a total of 522 commercial inspections, and basically the Prevention Education Division is anything you would call the fire department for that's not an actual emergency at that time. A lot of that comes through the Prevention Education Office. We have like I said, 522 commercial inspections completed by the P&E division. Those are the ones, while the companies will actually do inspections as well, these are the ones that are actually assigned to the Prevention Education Office. And I'm going to jump down just a little bit, the 515 commercial inspections completed by the Operation Divisions. That number, they go out and do those inspections, but if they don't get compliance, then those inspections are actually turned over to the P&E division. So the 522 number can actually go up depending on the compliance that the operations guys get. Then we have the building inspections on campus, certified housing inspection by our campus PEO. That's a total of 93 combined. And then we also have the multifamily housing inspections, which is completed by our operations division. Now, when we do the multifamily inspections, we're not going unit by unit. We just do the commons areas. So then we have our home fire life safety inspections, or actually I don't like the word inspection. We do basically a survey. We go out and we check the homes and we ask if they have working smoke detectors. If they don't have them, we will actually put them in for them. And if they need batteries changed, we'll change the batteries for them. And we do that in homes that are duplex or lower. We don't, if it's 3 apartments or more, then we don't actually knock on those doors. The landlords are providing those detectors. The number you see, the number of homes visited last year, I'm proud to say that that's 100% of the homes that we had on our list as far as the ones we were trying to reach. And we got 100% completion last year and the year before that, which is an anomaly. Usually we don't have a chance to get to all of them because we don't go out if it's raining. If it's raining, we try not to track a lot of mud and stuff into people's homes. We try to be considered in that area. But in addition to that, we have a heat clause that may cause us to not be able to get out and get into some of the homes. The 1,248 homes that were entered, and we actually enter those and check smoke detectors. Not all homes that we get in, sometimes we might get into a home and check detectors. There may be other times where they'll say they've checked their detectors, but they have other questions and fire safety related type issues that may come up. So we get in and we'll discuss those with them at that time. So as you see, the numbers are over 2,500 smoke detectors were actually checked, 118 detectors installed, and 258 detector batteries replaced. So instead of just handing out a detector to the residents, we actually put them in, we actually install them for them. As far as the prevention education, the numbers, number of people that we reach, we get into every grade school and we have a chance to interact with each and every student. There's over 2,400 students that we actually go in and teach fire safety and tornado safety to. What this number doesn't include is, the topic that it doesn't include is that we also assist Red Cross at times with water safety. We also had 650 students attend the fire prevention activities at Lincoln Square. And that number may be off a little bit because that's how many actually scheduled. We had drop-in students as well that come through the mall when we set up and we do our different fire prevention activities at the mall. And we had approximately 400 family members attend family night during Fire Prevention Week as well. This year we did something different. We actually did a side-by-side burn demonstration, and we had people come out for that, and it was pretty well received. There's an event that goes on at the county fairgrounds called Playing It Safe, and that's where different organizations get together, and it's like a safety-themed event that takes place at the county fairgrounds. We had over 1,500 people attend that last year, and we actually took our tornado safety simulator up there, and we were able to reach a lot of people. Extinguisher training. There are 22 extinguisher training classes at the U of I that FPO Levy actually conducted, and then we have 15 of them that went on in Urbana. When we do extinguisher trainings, different organizations can actually call us and request us to come out to do an extinguisher training, and we'll go out and do that. So we have 15 of those last year. And the community groups that we went out and spoke with, our goal is to bring the fire department to the community instead of just being someone that you see when you call 911. We actually try to get out to different community events, even if it's not fire safety related, so to speak, so that if you do call 911, we want you to feel like you have someone that you know coming to your assistance, as opposed to someone that, you know, just shows up when you call 911 and you never see them again otherwise. So there were 13 community groups addressed this past year, and some of those were about recruitment, but other times it's about just community activities, addressing different things in the community and how we can help young people make decisions that might help them become a firefighter later on in life, if that's what they want to do. So by reaching them early and at some of these events, we're actually helping to address them early if they want to become firefighters. We had 2,500 students that attended the 8th grade career conference, and this is the first year where we were able to actually speak with each and every student. I was able to, they had a keynote speaker speak to the students when they first came in, and then I was able to speak to all of them as they were leaving. That wasn't all at once. This went over a matter of a couple of weeks. But we had all the 8th grade students over in Champaign County come through one school at a time. We're involved with an Explorer Post with the Central Illinois Champaign County. Champaign County Fire Chiefs Association. We actually we're part of that Explorer Post, and we did 6 trainings with them, and then 30 fire safety trainings conducted, with 17 of those being in Urbana and 13 at the U of I. And when we say fire safety trainings, again, we go out to different organizations, and they may ask us to come in and have different questions about fire safety. Some things that they just don't know, or something they just want more clarity on. And we actually go out and do those. 86 fire drills were conducted. We do fire drills for all the schools every year, as well as organizations like DART. We'll go to different businesses and do their fire drills for them. And at the U of I mean, between the U of I and Urbana, we have reached 8,210 students as far as getting evacuated. And there were 8 families. You know, one of my most proud programs is the Shop with a Firefighter. There are 8 families that benefited. We were able to take them on a $500 shopping spree for Christmas. And that was all donated by Walmart and Meijer. And we were able to allow families to have a Christmas that may not have had one otherwise.
Okay, all that being said, that was just a familiarization with the fire department. And again, you know, with less than 4% fires, I mean, we put a lot of money, or I guess not as much money, but more time into prevention and education, and it takes everybody, the operations folks, the prevention folks, and everybody, so that really keeps our fires down. Okay, let me start into the budget here real quick. Total fire department budget, $7.742 million, 73, and our budget's kind of divided in half. We have a U of I fire contract for services, 2.148 million was our last billing, is our billing for 2016, and then the city funded part of the fire department is 5.594 million. And now the U of I fire department budget part, it directly funds the wages and benefits for 16 employees, 6 firefighters, 3 engineers, 6 company officers, and 1 prevention and education officer. The 6 company officers come in to effect that 3 of those officers are at the U of I station, and prior to this contract, we did not have any officers on our ladder truck, so that pays for the officers on our ladder truck. $107,775 is for non-personnel, and the items are listed there. That figure has not raised in many years. Now the $2 million for the firefighters, that's directly tied to our contractual wages and benefits. So every time that we do negotiate a contract, or health costs go up or pension costs go up, that's tied directly to the U of I contract, and we get reimbursed for that. The third thing U of I provides, they provide a fire substation for us. That includes the utilities, the maintenance, and all the operating costs. So that station basically costs the city nothing. The U of I Fire Department budget, or the Urbana Fire budget for the other 3 stations and the rest of the people is $4.6 million, and you can see that, or $5.6 million. $4.6 million of that funds the wages and the benefits for the balance of the 43.5 employees, which includes the chief officers, fire marshal, the half-time inspector, and administrative assistant, and all the operations folks. Of that budget, $73,780 is what we have for our annual supply purchases. For the 2016 budget, we reduced that 7% from FY15. Also, our annual services purchases are this $275,000, and we've reduced that $2,100 from FY15. We get down into a big chunk of this budget is our annual transfers, and these are our 4 annual transfers. We transfer almost $200,000 for the service on our vehicles and equipment, about $90,000 for liability insurance, $85,000 on workers' comp, and then the balance goes to the VERF fund for our vehicle and equipment replacement. The service purchases, that $275,000 portion, of that, there's about $89,000 that I really have control over. The other funds are spoken for by MetCAD and the city telephones, the computerization, all the items listed there. So out of that $89,000, we were able to reduce $2,100 of that by training technicians in the fire department to service our own air packs. So we've now got 6 folks that can take apart and repair any part of our air packs, and that's that $2,100 is just the beginning savings, and that's basically the cost of what we used to pay to flow test air packs annually. As we move through this year, we'll further realize savings from our own people repairing these air packs. We actually started this project in 2013. We had to spend a year training, getting the folks trained. Then we took the budget from the next year and used it to set up a shop and buy parts. So we're now in the business of repairing air packs, and we're realizing the savings from that. U of I Fire Department staffing. Our operations division staffing is controlled by the collective bargaining agreement with the IFF Local 1147. Our union contract states that every fire station will have 1 company officer, 1 engineer, and 1 firefighter. And additionally, in the city at all times, there'll be a ladder truck that'll be staffed with a company officer, an engine, and a firefighter. And I had mentioned earlier that I have 2 firefighters on 2 apparatus, and those 2 employees allow for guys to take their benefit time, and it allows us to keep the engine staffed without incurring overtime. And then again, the 1 shift carries the extra person who covers the sick leave, duty injury, or military leave. So that's the bulk of our staffing, those 55 folks in the operations division. These are the comparisons of our major overtime costs. One of the areas that I do have the ability to, that I actually have cut, and we've done this through some savings over the last year and a half, is the overtime budget. And these are our major expenses in overtime. You can see in FY14 we had $41,573 on this 3rd slot vacation. 6 months of the year, by contract, there's 3 employees that can be off on vacation. We don't have the extra person on staff on straight time to cover that, so every year that costs us overtime. And I've got my year-to-date FY15 figures are up through May 15th. Sick leave is another big cost, almost $84,000. To cover the Kelly days, they're not covered by our regularly staffed people, so that's a $25,000 cost. And then vacant position in FY14, you can see was $126,000. It's only been $8,800 this year, and that's the effect of not fully staffing the fire department. In FY14, we had 2 folks retire. In the middle of the year, we didn't fill those positions till January 1 of 15, and that was through the process of hiring the fire chief and making all promotions and all that stuff. So we incurred some large overtime costs for vacant positions that year, but offsetting that, we also had some money that we didn't totally spend at the firefighter rank and the DC rank because everybody was working up a grade. So that kind of balanced out our budget, but it just shows what happens when those operations positions aren't fully staffed. Our duty injury, you can see, was a lot more in FY15. We were dealing with an employee with a shoulder injury that year, and those costs have reduced significantly this year. Our budget reductions, we went ahead and reduced our overtime budget for FY16 by $30,000. About a year and a half ago, we kind of changed the way we were doing meetings and the way we were doing committees, and we had a lot of meetings that we paid overtime for people to help us with projects and do things. And I'm talking our employees, and we have seriously reduced that in the last year to savings of $8,000. Special project overtime we've reduced for $2,000. Special operations training, that was we instituted a flex schedule in our last union contract, and that's attributed to about $10,000 in savings going forward in the next budget year. And then code enforcement, we're now paying Clay Bear straight time to do our P&E inspections as opposed to firefighters on overtime, so that's a $10,000 savings. So that's where we got our $30,000. Again, I talked about the air system testing, the $2,100, and then the $5,500 was our 7% reduction in our supplies budget. And Phil took the biggest hit on that, $5,000, and that was a lot of things that we purchased to pass out to the kids in the schools. And when we discussed that, we figured it was more important that Philip and our prevention education team and our people get to the schools and spend time in the schools rather than buying them trinkets that say Urbana Fire Department on them. So we reduced that money out. We haven't really totally settled our capital purchases for FY16. What we do have online for our purchases, we've got a new Engine 251 ordered, and I think I had described that vehicle to you guys at an earlier meeting last year. That was budgeted in FY15. We ordered it in January. It's on a 330-day delivery, so we made a $250,000 down payment. It's being built, and we're looking at a December delivery, and we'll need to pay the balance of the $274,000 on that vehicle. Engine 251, also, we've got some rescue equipment that we'll be purchasing. We have a 2015 VERF fund for that rescue equipment that we'll be carrying over to 16 to complete the rescue equipment on that engine. Probably the only new purchases that we're going to request for FY16 is replacing the mobile computers in the fire apparatus. They're on a 7-year replacement schedule. They're kind of limping along, and so we're we've got them scheduled to be replaced in 2016, and if budget allows, that's what we'll do. We've got a revenue proposal on the table, and it's ambulance fees. We currently charge each ambulance service $500 a year to operate in the city. We've got a proposed annual fee on the table of $30,000, and that seems like a lot of money, but it's based on about half of the cost of what the Urbana Fire Department has for supplying and administered EMS calls. We did half because we were assuming a 50% collection rate from the ambulance services on the services they require. If you look at the number of calls, which over a 3-year average is 2,492 calls, that's about a $12 per call that is run in the city per year would equal that $30,000. We came up with that our cost run those calls based on 10 staff hours per month at the division chief rate. DC Odell runs that program. He monitors the ambulance's response times to be in compliance with our ordinance, to make sure our citizens are getting the service that they deserve and expect. And then any quality of service issues that come into the fire department, he investigates those. So we've attributed about 10 staff hours a month to him. So if at the bottom of this slide, you can see his staff hours calculated at $6,000. And that's on his staff hour. That's not only his wage, that's his pension costs, work comp. I mean, the total package of what it costs to have him here. Cost for dispatch. Our dispatch cost for those calls is about $50,000. Whenever we have a medical dispatch come in, an engine gets dispatched and an ambulance gets dispatched out of our station. And so we've attributed half of our cost to getting them out the door through dispatch. Personnel cost is $87,000, and that's based on about 19 and a half minutes. About 19 and a half minutes per call on the wages of a fire officer, engineer, and firefighter. And then our cost of supplies and equipment, that's basically defibrillator pads, gloves, things that we use. And now there's a lot of the equipment that we use that we trade out with the ambulances, because the ambulance service bills the customer for all the hard supplies, whether it's the drugs we use, the oxygen masks, or the IVs. They replace all that stuff for us, and then it gets billed to the customer. So that's kind of the basis of that.
So is this comparable to what other cities do?
Not locally with what Champaign actually currently charges less than what we do.
I mean other cities in the rest of Illinois or in
Yeah.
the rest of the country.
Yeah, that I'm not sure of. As far
But
as
it's not in the budget yet, but you're proposing it.
yeah, we're proposing it. We've talked to both ambulance companies about it. They've got some concerns about it, and so we're like I said, it's proposed at this point. We'll have discussions with them on it. We'll see what their ideas are, but you know, basically with our budget situation, we've got to get some revenue in the fire department or cut some positions. And with our minimum staffing and our fire contract, we're very limited on what positions we can cut. And we're kind of in a position that if we cut a fire position, it actually raises our expenses, because then we have to staff that position with overtime. And you know, between administration and P&E, that's 4.5 people, and we're actually through our commercial inspections and fire prevention permits, we're producing about twice as much money as what we're paying out in staff positions in that. So that's kind of where we're at in staffing, and that's why we're looking at these ambulance fees, and we've got a couple of other areas we're looking at, but the ambulance fee is the bulk of that.
Diane?
I was reading somewhere, and I don't remember the city, where they're experimenting with not sending an engine on the medical calls. They're using some sort of smaller vehicle, still sending the trained firefighter EMS folks as well as the ambulance. But have you considered or looked into that scenario? Seems like a lot of wear and tear on engines going out to treat medical calls.
Yeah, I know. I can't remember how many years ago we went to a priority medical dispatch because we were sending engines out the door on calls that were extremely basic. We call them alpha level calls, and that's basically what broken bones and things that aren't life safety issues. And so we kind of addressed that. That's probably been how many years ago? 10 years ago or more?
Yeah, we've tried to accommodate that with the Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, Echo calls, and there's 5 different levels of calls, and the dispatch center, the 911 center, will actually take your information down and figure out where you're at in that level of call. So if it doesn't, let's like an Alpha is nausea, or if you fell and it's 6 hours ago, that would be an Alpha level call. So in that case, you would just get an ambulance only call. Now the higher acuity calls, the Bravo, the Charlie, and the Delta calls, that's when you're going to get a fire engine and an ambulance respond together. Now we're strategically placed around the city, obviously, so that we can get to your homes within 4 minutes. That's our goal. Where the private ambulance companies, they have a little longer response times that they may that they have. So That's why you, on the higher acuity calls, you get a fire engine and an ambulance as well.
I see.
Diane?
And are your, it seems like with the U of I, with these high rises, and I'm just curious if the calls for service from the U of I and the actual expenses of the U of I are being covered by, currently by the arrangement you have.
Yeah, our personnel costs are. What's not keeping up is the non-personnel costs, and I think I sent you guys a slide on that. I'll cover that in a minute. I got some
Okay.
good information on that, on the things that we believe they're not keeping up on, and I've voiced my concerns with our contracting administrator.
Bill?
On the ambulance calls, they go out with every EMS call, so that's about half your calls total? Is that-
No, the ambulances actually respond on about 1,000 ambulance-only calls, or that A-level call. The ambulances with the fire department will respond with this for about roughly 2,500 calls, I think is the average. So you'll get an ambulance and a fire engine, so that means that it's probably a Bravo through Echo response.
So what was the 1,000? I'm sorry.
That's an ambulance only. So,
So
like
they
if-
go out maybe 3,400 times?
yeah, in the city, yes.
And then of those times, do you know about what percentage they actually end up transporting somebody?
I sure don't.
Okay, just curious. Okay, thanks.
Charlie?
Yeah, Brian, the one number that that always concerns me, of course, with fire is overtime, and you've made a lot of efforts to try to stabilize that. But if you look at what's spent in one year versus another, it really bounces all over the place. I'm trying to figure out how you came up with your 353.9 for this year, or for the proposed fiscal year, as that looks like it's running a little higher than what you're actually going to spend for the current fiscal year.
Yeah, we've really done well this current fiscal year. We haven't had any duty injuries this year. We've had some sick leave, which ends up costing us some overtime because sick leave doesn't really isn't funded in the city, so that comes directly against overtime. But yeah, I mean, I was going to say in 2014 we experienced a lot of time off when Rusty was sick. And then we had a shoulder injury that lasted for about a year, that we had an employee. He would be off for a while, then he'd be on light duty for a while, depending on how the shoulder was doing. So those things are really hard to estimate. So we're really cautious as we reduce that, because you never know when a duty injury may happen, or when you've got a sickness, long-term sickness of an employee in the fire department that, again, we have to replace that person when they're not here. So it's kind of a throw of the dice on how much overtime money you're going to need. So yeah, we're not using near all of our overtime money this year. The things that I did reduce were things that for sure savings that we've got, just because of the actions that we took.
Okay. So, I know retirements are rare in the fire department,
Yes.
given the small size of the department. But are you able to at least predict those and get somebody in the pipeline to help?
We do. We have our promotional list lasts 3 years, and we do a promotional testing every year, so we've always got an active promotional list for engineers, lieutenants, and captains. We test for firefighter once every 2 years, and we've got an active list for firefighter. The year in 2014, when we went from June through, actually July through January 1, without replacing those positions, we were using an entirely new testing process that was mandated by the state. And so we made a decision that we would wait till we got that list in place to hire those positions. And then plus during that time was when we went through the interim fire chief time. But we didn't go over budget because, obviously we had the open positions at the lower ranks, which, that line item end up having extra money in it to cover the overage and the overtime.
Okay. Mike Madigan.
Hey, Chief, so the CMS fee, you're proposing a 60-fold increase, is that right,
Yes.
to 30,000?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I see in your breakdown there that you're saying that that's a $12 average per call.
Yes.
Is that something then that the EMS company can bill?
Well, in the discussions that we had with them today, and basically that $12 charge, it depends on how the customer's paying. If it's a Medicare or Medicaid payment, they can bill anything they want, and they're just only going to get a certain amount of money. And so that's one of the struggles that they have. The other struggle is that I don't think they even get a 50% collection rate on the ambulance calls they do run. So they struggle in a couple of areas there, and that's some places that we're going to have the discussions with them and maybe even find some other revenue areas through coordination with them. I mean, we've kind of brought them into the process and said, hey, help us do this, help us figure this out. And there's been some good ideas go across the table so far.
Okay. And can you tell me, a couple of other folks have brought up, and I think this is almost maybe an annual thing, this whole getting our arms around the fire department's role in EMS.
Yeah,
And it's a major expense.
it is. It's half of our calls.
Right. So, to me, and this is certainly not to diminish the fire department's role in the community, but it almost seems like a duplication of service. It seems like we're sending 3 vehicles for one call, and in many instances, 2 of them city-funded.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm just wondering, I mean, do you feel confident that you've explored as many opportunities as you can to limit the fire department's role in this? Because, I mean, I think we do have a pretty fine EMS service in this town, too. I mean, do you feel like you've done everything you can to limit the city's expense here?
Yeah, probably the biggest advantage of living in Urbana is the MTI level service and what our engine companies do when they get on the scene, especially when you get in areas like the southeast Urbana neighborhoods where it takes a while for
I'm
the
sorry to
ambulance get down
interrupt.
there.
Can I ask you what MTI is? I don't
It's-
understand the
Yeah, Derek, why don't you
acronyms.
take this question?
Yeah, so the MTI level, there's 3 levels of service that the Illinois Department of Public Health certify. You have an EMTI level, or an EMT level, which is basic first aid, you know, Band-Aids, splints, and things of that nature. We're fortunate enough to be the EMTI level service. So what that means is that we can start IVs, we can do cardiac monitoring, we can give you medications for pains, for seizures, for chest pains, and things of that nature. So we're considered an advanced level provider. And then there's the paramedic level, which the ambulances are. So they can give, well, we do a lot of similar treatments, but they can do, you know, they have a few more medications and a little nicer monitoring equipment. They could send 12 leads and things like that, and that's just looking at your heart rhythm and determining if you have an MI or anything. So we have looked at that, and I think we're doing a really good job by getting, you know, not sending the fire apparatus out for alpha level calls. I think that's the first step. And then, like I said, time matters in EMS, and you know that's why we have the fire stations spread out around the city. You're exactly right. Our ambulance companies do provide a good service. They provide great transport service, but there are times, and you know, the ordinance says that they have to be for an alpha level call 12 minutes or less. So where we're like, and then on a Bravo, it's 8 minutes or less. Where we want to be to your doorstep in less than 4.5 minutes. That's our goal at the fire department. And if you're having a heart attack or a stroke, time matters. And so I think we're doing a good job at not duplicating services, but giving you the best patient care in that stance.
Okay. Do we know, and then you kind of led me to my final question, which is, oh, actually, no, I have one more after this. So what is the average response time for the local ambulance service?
Well, the ordinance requires them to be under those times that I stated.
No, I'm not interested in what the ordinance
what ours
requires.
is?
I'm interested in what their average response time is, not what's required.
I'd say
What do they report?
Yeah, it's very close to that 8 and 12 minutes.
Could we maybe follow up with them and find
Yeah.
out? I'd really like to know specifically what they run.
Yeah, 90% of the time, they're in that 8 to 12-minute response time. But I can get you the exact figures.
Okay, that'd be great. And then finally, if we're having a new fire truck, do we have one for sale?
We will have.
And what do we think that might bring?
You
And
know, I
has
ta-
that been calculated into your budget?
Yeah, I talked to a used fire, it hasn't been calculated in, but I talked to a used apparatus dealer that thinks we could get anywhere from 10 to 15,000 for it. It's a 1987 model, and it's what's called a canopy cab. It's not a closed cab in the back.
We don't need to talk about it anymore if that's all
Yeah,
we're
that's
talking
about
about.
all it's
That's
worth.
good.
I mean, it's
We can move on.
you might be
Good
able
for-
to
good for
put like
parades.
you might be able to put a smoker on the back of it.
I may talk to you.
Sounds like
That might be an
playground.
inappropriate insider deal, though, so I better not do that.
Sounds like playground apparatus.
Yeah.
Eric?
So I happened to be present at, close to 2 incidents at which the fire department was the first to arrive with a big piece of equipment. And one was a traffic accident where there was a person bleeding out on the sidewalk. And another was a drug overdose when a person was undergoing seizures. And though these are, I think, are examples of the time-sensitive things where it might make a real difference if you have a 4-minute response or if you have a 10-minute response. So I do understand that that's an extra expense, but I think it probably, I don't know if you have an estimate for how many lives it has actually made a difference in terms of people, surviving the incident, but I imagine it's more than zero.
Yeah, that's almost like when you're talking about fires compared to fire prevention too, because those records are hard to keep because it's hard to track a fire that didn't start. In the same way with these EMS calls.
Charlie?
Well, if we're going to get averages, we might as well get our average time too, and what our ranges are.
Okay.
And, the intervals, the quartiles and whatever they report are probably pretty good numbers. I was thinking another issue is, are you folks prepared to deal with stroke patients? What can you do there? I guess because that's another big concern. Strokes is sort of like the flip side of heart attack.
Absolutely, and as you know, that's a big point of emphasis right now. But the most important thing for stroke patients is to get them to stroke centers. So what we can do in order to get them there quickly is have some of that patient treatment done before the ambulance gets there, like the IVs, the oxygen, and things of that nature. And then when they get there, they're able to load them right in the ambulance and get them to the hospital. So by getting those advanced level care levels done before they get there, that helps the whole situation out. There's no magic drug that is going to prevent that that's provided by the fire department or the ambulance. So.
And as
Go ahead.
I just want to follow up, and some of our firefighters are trained as full-blown paramedics as well.
Yeah,
aren't they?
actually, we're very blessed. We've had about, and I'm one of them, about 17 paramedics that are on staff, and a lot of them have worked at our local ambulance companies here in town.
Dennis?
So is it then the thing that isn't working to make these emergency response calls less expensive for the community has little to do then with the size of the vehicle that's arriving? It's more than the number of individuals that are sponsoring or staffing that drive to the emergency site? And I guess I'm wondering if there isn't a way of having a mid-sized vehicle, not as large and heavy as your standard fire truck, used for emergency calls if you know that it's a Bravo or there's not an actual fire, but you're acting like an emergency ambulance call. So if you had staffing, if you had a truck that was kitted out for that kind of thing, would we save money? And would that be a useful thing to have at the fire department?
I think a lot of that's risk management, because when you put a crew on a vehicle that's not adequate to provide all the services that the fire department provides, then you have a certain amount of time when that vehicle's unavailable. For example, obviously we're running our advanced medical service from each of 4 fire stations in the city, and if we chose one of those stations and did a smaller vehicle, then those folks would be away from the fire truck. So if they cleared a medical call and they immediately got dispatched to a fire, they'd have to come back to the fire station, change vehicles, and go again. It would affect the response times. And that's actually where we came from. We did that up through 1998. And at that point in time, we had a smaller vehicle. We ran medical calls on throughout the city, but that vehicle was having to respond from downtown in this building. And so if you wanted that vehicle southeast, you were not going to get a 4.5-minute response. And that vehicle was cross-staffed with the ladder company, and so if we had a fire, and he staffed it, I can remember some fires that he did, if they were out on a medical call, they would have to clear that call, return to the fire station, get the ladder truck, and take it back out to the fire. And it just causes unnecessary delays. So when we set an apparatus up, we set it up so that it does everything. I mean, they've got hydraulic tools on them. The engines have ground ladders. They've got the pumps. They've got the medical equipment. They've all got water rescue equipment. You know, we really tried to make the engines multifunctional, so whatever call comes in and whose ever neighborhood, they're going to be there in that 4.5 minutes at the most to deliver whatever service is needed. So that's it makes it. We've been there. We did that prior to 1998, and what we're doing now we think works better.
Okay. Anything else?
I think we've got just a couple more things here. This is just, and you've got this in the handout I gave you. This is just the basic history of our grant revenue. We're very fortunate to have a good grant writer, one of our operations chiefs, and he's hit 3 federal grants in a row for us. And he's now applied for a 2014 grant, so they're just now starting to award. They've just awarded the first round. So we've got some advanced training props that he's applied for in that grant. Additionally, we've applied for a Fireman's Fund Insurance Group grant. It's through that insurance company. And they have a grant that they'll fully fund vehicle exhaust removal systems. And so we've applied for $48,000 with no matching funds for that grant. The key to getting that grant is to getting a agent for this company nearby to help you sponsor the grant and push the grant. We haven't been able to do that yet. So if anybody knows a Fireman's Fund company that brokers or has that insurance, that would help us greatly for this grant. And these vehicle exhaust system removal kind of plays directly to our cancer prevention that we're pushing in the fire department. We want to get all of these chemicals evacuated out of the stations as quickly as possible after these trucks go out the door. So right now we're applied for 2 grants.
Okay.
Last year, if you can remember, on the FY15 budget, we increased our fire prevention permit fees. And I just wanted to show the effect of that. We haven't, on the fund schedule, we didn't apply for any increases this year on this, but it did get our revenue up from the $46,500 to almost the $65,000 level. And again, to help us with this process, we added the half-time building inspector. We have put a little more money in our hazmat supplies budget because some of these fees are hazmat fees, and that keeps us ready to respond to these hazmat emergencies, and most of that is to maintain our monitoring equipment. This right here, Diane, is what I was talking about on the non-personnel costs for the U of I Fire Department. this cost in the original U of I contract back in 1988 was adjusted by what was known as the percentage change to the university's calculation of continuing components. And they were incremental funds given to the university by the General Assembly. The U of I has not received these funds in several years, therefore the fire department has it. I think in 1998, the first year of the contract, we collected about $92,000 on this fund, and you can see it hasn't went up much since 1998. I've voiced my concerns to Craig Grant at the U of I, who administers our U of I contract. He's talked to his folks, and it's been pushed on up the command chain at the U of I. I got the update from him today. He said that they're taking my request seriously, but they're not sure where they will find the money or what manner in which that they will try to calculate, our rising expenses that are non-personnel. One thing we're really fortunate of is that our contract, the biggest thing that expense we have is personnel, and the contract keeps up with our personnel costs. There's no doubt about that. It's dollar for dollar they pay our expense. But this fee right here has not kept up, and so they're evaluating that, and we're just kind of waiting to find out what the outcome of that evaluation is going to be.
That's one thing I want to use to offset our MetCat increases.
Mm-hmm.
Bill?
Just on on that subject, remember you saying that you had walkthroughs of U of I buildings, a lot of training and stuff
Yes.
that goes on. Is that just for the division or the station on the U of I campus, or do all the firefighters get that training?
No, our campus station walks through a little over 100 buildings per year on campus, and so if we put a different crew there every year, we've identified with the U of I about 100 buildings that they walk through. Additionally, we have 60 buildings that we consider really key buildings, and so we divide those buildings up between the other 3 stations in the fire department, and each station will walk through 20 buildings a year, and it's on a rotating, it's a 3-year rotation. So in 3 years, they'll get through all 60 of those major historical buildings, or, as far as size and function on the U of I. So we walk through almost 600 walkthroughs a year on campus.
So the increased fee would cover officers at that station, but we actually have additional training for all the officers that maybe the increased the personnel fee might not be covering.
Yeah,
Is that
yeah.
right?
I mean, that $107,000. It's capital fees for like maintenance, insurance, and replacement of the fire truck over there, and it doesn't come close to that. A fire truck now is $500,000, and it covers our personal protective equipment. It costs about $3,000 a firefighter to equip him, and just the clothing, and the air pack is about another $5,000. So it's expensive to equip a person to go into a fire.
Okay.
And so we just have continuing costs and replacements on that. So if we can get that up to speed, it would help us a lot.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Facilities, I wanted to list here and kind of give you a report on the facilities that the fire department has now. Urbana maintains 3 fire stations. The one in this building at 400 South Vine, built in 1964. It had a remodel in 96. The fire department didn't get a lot of that remodel. This end of the building was kind of remodeled, and some things were rearranged at that building where we actually lost a little square footage. There's no ventilation system in any of our fire stations. That's why we've applied for that grant. And we have some life safety code issues with this station in this building as far as the fire alarm system. And it's actually the only part of the building that's not covered with a sprinkler system. The rest of the building is. But where the firefighters sleep, we don't have a sprinkler system. Yeah.
Hopefully that truck's not on fire.
Yeah, as long as it's not burning. Fire Station 2, 2103 South Filer Road. It was built in 1968. Actually, we updated the dorm probably 5 or 6 years ago with volunteer laborers. One of our guys made some cabinets, and we did a remodel in that dorm. It again has no ventilation system, and it doesn't have any bathroom facilities for females other than a lock on the door. Fire Station 3 at 1407 North Lincoln. It was built in 1972. We did get female bathroom facilities added about 8 years ago. Again, it doesn't have a ventilation system. And we did replace the kitchen 5 years ago. We did get the construction of our cabinets paid for, and then the rest of the remodel was with volunteer labor from firefighters. So that's kind of where we're at on our fire stations. Philip, this last part is a proposal that Philip's got that he's working on with housing.
This is a program that we're proposing. It's in its incipient stages. And basically what we're wanting to do is have some kind of way to recognize and reward landlords that go above and beyond just the bare minimum when it comes to following codes and things like that. And as you can see, it's like you have bronze, silver, and gold ratings. And to get the bronze rating, you just sit through a 4-hour training. Have the managers or the property managers and landlords sit through a 4-hour training, and they can be considered a bronze certified, fire safe apartment. And then silver, you will have training along with the sprinkler system or a fire alarm system. And then to get to the gold level, you will have the training, sprinkler system, and a fire alarm system. And basically what this does, this benefits the landlord because they can actually market their apartment when someone's sending their children down here to go to school and to stay in these apartments. They will be able to say that we're actually a certified, fire safe certified apartment building that you're sending your children to, and they're certified through the Urbana Fire Department. Now, we're not saying that your building will not catch fire. That's not what we're saying. What we're saying is that you're able to say that you've taken the measures needed to decrease the chance of fire happening in your building, and you're taking safety seriously. The elements of this program include, like I said, a 4-hour training class. They will go through, pass a simple written test, and they will have to pass their annual fire inspections that they get anyway that we do, but they will have to do an additional annual inspection of the individual units. While we know that no one looks forward to another inspection, there is something that they can get from this by actually participating in this voluntary program. In addition, they will have to do an annual fire drill and distribute fire safety material to the renters. And the benefits for this will be that the landlords have great marketing, as I said before. The tenants have a safer dwelling, and the parents are comfortable knowing that they're sending their children down here to stay in an apartment where the landlords have taken the steps to make it even more fire safe. And what it does for us is there's a reduction in false alarms, because some of the material that we will hand out would be, encouraging people not to pull the alarms falsely and to take those types of things seriously. And the city of Urbana, we actually benefit because we have the reputation for doing what we already do, which is putting safety first. But this is just another avenue through which we can really push that out there among our landlords. So basically, when we thought about doing this, it's a way of, like I said, rewarding and recognizing those landlords that go above and beyond anyway. If everyone gets the same prize, what's the impetus to go try harder? So this is just a way that, who knows, they could probably, mention this to their insurance company and possibly get some kind of, deal or something. So it's in its incipient stages. We're hoping to be able to roll this out by summer of 2016.
Okay. Thank you very much. Any other questions for the fire department? I think you covered it very thoroughly. Okay, Public Works.
Okay. I'm going to give you a quick overview of the Public Works Department presentation. Thanks. First of all, here's a fairly recent picture of our employees group at one of our department meetings. We have about 80 FTEs in the department. That's our mission statement. We're divided up into 6 divisions. We're about $10 million annually in operating expenses. And when you look at the 12 funds that we manage this year, it's about $35 to $40 million worth of expenses that our department is responsible for. So our task was to find $33,000 in cuts. We delivered that amount, and this is what makes up the cuts and the budget highlights for the fiscal year. There's an engineering technician position in the engineering division we're not filling. That's about $60,000 in salary, excluding benefits and longevity pay. There's 3 6-month seasonal positions in the utility division, excuse me, it should be operations division, that are vacant. Those are folks that help with concrete, asphalt, and things like that during the summertime. Out-of-state travel, there is no out-of-state travel for any public works staff. We cut our budget $7,000 to reflect savings in out-of-state travel. Salt commodity budget was increased $14,000, $14,500, and really that's a dollar amount that reflects realistically what we have been spending over the last 5 years or more. It also reflects modest cost increase in the state contract for salt. So we were going over that line item over the last several years, excluding the extremely high year last year. So this is a more realistic average budget. For parking lot snow removal, we had been charging that to the general fund for years, knowing the general fund needed help. Since it's parking lots, we're now charging around $5,800 to the motor vehicle parking system fund. So we've transferred an expense to the MVPS. Emerald ash borer treatment, arborists have told me that the EIB is really kicked up in town in Champaign-Urbana. We have almost 500 trees. We're trying to remove them along with other trees in distress on a year-by-year basis, but we increased, we thought we'd increase treatment of trees to try to save specimen trees, and we, by shifting some funds around, have come up with $2,100 to treat maybe up to 10 trees per year to try to save trees or at least prolong their life. Use cycle carts, we purchase those every other year, sometimes every 3rd year. We're down to our last carts, so we're really close to the end. About 2/3 of our residents have the 60-gallon cart. We would like to, we're budgeting $33,000 to hopefully get us through the next 2 to possibly 3 years, and we'll get closer and closer to that 100% level, hopefully, with our 8,000 or 9,000 customers we have in the community. Asset management software, Elizabeth mentioned earlier, there's $100,000 available to do this. Our software is about 20 years old. This really needs to be upgraded. I think this would help all our staff, especially our managers and managing our department. So that is a new expense. Facility master planning, these are unbudgeted items, but again, for the many years I've done this, we have no money set aside. We'd like to do a public facility master plan. Fire chief talked about his buildings. Ours go back to the early 60s. I know many of you have been out to the LRC. That too does not have a separate female washroom, and it's very small and needs to be updated. So anyway, we don't have the dollars, but we want to at least keep it to the forefront that this is an area that at some point we need to analyze so we can make better informed decisions when we replace big ticket items like HVAC and roofing and that sort of thing. Again, citywide, we really need to do a program needs assessment, a facility assessment, and a master plan. Again, ballpark, $100,000 to $200,000, which would include fire, police, community development, all the departments. This chiller atop our roof here is on its last leg. It's about 16 years old, 1998. It's $75,000. It hasn't been budgeted, but I want to give a heads up that we can't control how much longer it's going to last, but we're seeing some repairs in the last few years that need to be done. Again, this is what it looks like. And it controls about 2/3 of the cooling in this building. If it does go out in the middle of July, it will take us probably till the end of the summer to replace it. But again, we've not identified dollars to replace that chiller. And it was in 1998 is when it was last installed. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. I have our division heads here to help me answer your questions.
Charlie?
Bill, in looking at your personnel cuts, you mentioned an engineering tech. Is that the planning and map category here? That
Yes, and
Okay.
it's the primary responsibilities are right-of-way inspections and right-of-way issues throughout the
Okay.
city.
So it's gone from 5 to 4 to 3. So you already took a cut a couple of years ago there
No,
as well, or
this is the only engineering staff person that's been cut.
okay. And then 120,000 is the under miscellaneous services. That's the new software.
That includes $20,000, which may be a little aggressive as to its expenditure, but about $20,000 we think for updates and support. So whatever software we purchase, and we've interviewed about a half dozen firms, at least get a feel for what products are out there. You know, kind of in the middle range, it's about a $20,000 a year fee to get the upgrades and get support.
Okay. And so I assume you're working with Sanford and
Yes.
trying to integrate it with everything else in the
Yeah, he's
city.
been wonderful. He's been at every one of our meetings,
Okay.
and he's essentially written our RFP.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Anyone else? Eric?
This isn't specifically for Bill, but it's a general budget thing. And the general thing is that I wonder if we can also, in addition to the documents that we're receiving, if we could also get the underlying spreadsheets so that we can, you know, search those, and that would, I think, be useful.
Okay, here's Elizabeth Hannon to answer that question.
There actually are no underlying spreadsheets. There's an Access database, if you want to search that.
Oh, okay, so it's not, okay, so there are no Excel spreadsheets
No,
associated with
it's
this.
all in an Access database. I mean, I suppose I could dump it all the line items into an Excel spreadsheet for you if you want it, but it would be probably difficult to search that way.
Right.
Why don't, if you want to...
Maybe we could talk offline a
Yeah,
little bit about
let's
how to make
talk if
that
there's something
accessible, yeah.
specific you want.
Sure.
I think I can.
Okay, thanks.
Dennis and then Diane?
What's the status or the fate of the TriStar building at Learman, at Washington and Philo Road, and is it going to be for sale?
Thank you. Yes, Community Development is taking the lead on a request for qualifications from commercial realtors. I would say we're a month to 2 months away from selecting a realtor to hopefully list it for sale.
Diane?
So I totally agree with you that a facility study and a program needs assessment is just critical, but there's also the viewpoint that if you don't have the money to actually address the needs that are identified or do the facilities work that's been identified, it becomes out of date fairly soon. So what's the pros and cons of focusing on a facility needs if you haven't identified a source of money to take care of the needs, or should you go ahead and do the study and then figure out a way to finance it after that? I mean, it seems like you have to have the needs identified in a plan, but at what point do you do that?
I think it helps in a lot of ways, even if the money isn't currently available. First of all, it provides a roadmap for each department as to where will they be Will it be this building? Will it be an expansion of this building? Will it be a different building? Almost every month, the facilities division has to make decisions as to repair, replace, or let it ride. And for example, if there are certain facilities that we knew would no longer be supported, let's say the South Fire Station, it's 1965 vintage or whatever, and the roof needs to be replaced. Well, if we knew a new fire station was going to be built within 5 years, we would patch the roof. If it had a leak, we wouldn't replace it for $100,000, for example. So it's those sorts of decisions that we come all the time. Right now, we're more or less replacing. So if the roof leaks in the South Fire Station, we're going to replace it because we know no difference. So I think secondly is whether it's a $1 million or a $10 million or $100 million expansion, you can still break that up into phases, by department or by type, what have you. And I think that would be very helpful for the city for facility planning. For example, if a department would happen to leave, at some point, maybe that's phase one of a project, a $3 million whatever somewhere, and we retrofit some other part of the building to accommodate another department. It's kind of a domino effect can be, or we all stay here. Public Works, conversely, is kind of spread out. We're in generally four different locations. It'd be nice everybody was under one roof for control and consolidation of things. So I totally understand that we don't have $1 or $10 or $100 million sitting in the bank anywhere, but I think we need at some point pull the trigger, at least get a feel, because we've added staff. We have people shoehorned in different closets literally around this building. You can take a tour and see where we're at, and people downstairs and everywhere, and we just literally can't put people anywhere anymore, and we're getting to that point, and I think it hampers us with our efficiencies too.
So is that an internal, that would be hiring somebody to do that?
You would absolutely need a consultant. An architect would be the person to hire. And you would go through, interviewing each department head and their respective staff, and go through, what are your programs? I mean, the fire department, you just heard a great presentation of what the programs are. Okay, so you understand the programs and what are the future programs, if you're going to expand programs or not. So that's identified. Then you come up with a space needs assessment. Okay. Fire departments, they need 2 conference rooms, not 1 conference room, for example. So that's another 200 square feet that needs to be added to the footprint of their needs. Okay, it goes on and on. So after the space needs are done, then you get into what's called master planning. So for Public Works, for example, should we buy 610 South Glover? Thank you for doing that, but or should we not buy that piece of property? Where are we going to expand? Or are we going to just totally abandon South Glover and move to some new site? Technically, we don't know. I think we're going to stay put and expand, but master planning helps you with those pros and cons. So it takes a professional architect, and usually our departments are so specific, like places got real security concerns, so you would need someone maybe as a sub-consultant to help with security needs. Public Works may need a sub-consultant that's a real fleet expert. So there will be sub-experts helping the architect do certain parts of the planning process. But this is done all the time. Urbana Park District, new maintenance facility, they went through the process. Champaign County Highway Department has a new facility, they went through the process. I mean, it's a pretty rote process of what has to happen.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Bill, you were talking about the chiller needing to be replaced. Did you say 75,000?
Correct.
Don't you think that should be done before it fails?
We believe so. I think
Yeah.
we should try to make that happen sooner.
Right. So we don't have the money in the budget
No.
yet to buy the land where the Barnes Mobile Home is?
Oh, no, that money is in the budget.
That money is in the budget, okay.
Yeah, and we.
So the one that isn't in the budget that I think is really immediate is the chiller.
Yes.
Because that's going to be really expensive if it goes out and everybody can't really work in this building.
Right.
So.
Yeah, but no, I'm sorry, the 610 South Glover, that's in the budget, $113,000.
Okay. Any other questions? Bill?
I was trying to compare what some of the things that were named differently last year's budget versus this year's. There were some transfers. I think last year it was capital, and some of that went into VERF. So where would I find what that VERF is allocated for? Is that in here?
I don't, what page are you on, or?
Well, this is page 65. Kind of the summaries with the transfers is listed for all of them now. Last year, we called under Public Works where it says transfers. Last year it was capital. Under Civic Center last year it was contractual. Now it's transfers. So then I guess you go farther and you can kind of see it broken down. So on those two, so there's a transfer to VERF for this year proposed $361,000. Where would I find what is that? Has that been allocated, or is that just your normal annual transfer to VERF? And would that be something we could tap for a chiller?
Well, we have budget issues in the VERF as well. So that's, what we did was for next year for the VERF, we budgeted just basically the same level as this year. We need to tear that budget apart and clean it up completely. But there is, on page 126, all the expenditure detail that shows you what is in the VERF. But we'll find a way before the budget gets approved to deal with the chiller. I'm not sure that VERF is the answer, or whether we'll find another place for it.
Okay. And do you happen to know what the, I think it was about $10,000 in the Civic Center was contractual now that wasn't before a couple of years ago? The way I read it, I don't know, maybe I read it wrong.
What page or line item?
I can get back with you on the individual basis.
Yeah, I am going to point out that there were a lot of issues in the past with the way that expenditures were categorized, and so I've done my best to clean that up, but as a result, you do see things moving between categories. So, for example, in the past, we didn't have a category called transfer, so it was very difficult to track, you know, money moving between funds even, so.
Okay, thanks.
Aaron?
What was the savings on the 3 seasonal positions? I don't know.
$27,500.
Thank
you. Diane?
Well, what are the chances of finding money for a facilities study, as long as we're searching? I've always thought it's just very important to do, and we keep pushing it off year after year.
Like most things with the budget, it's a question of priorities.
Yeah.
And so if there is something else that we could choose not to do, we could find that money. The other thing to keep in mind is that we do have an additional $500,000 transfer to the Capital Improvement Fund, which we were not planning to make until the state budget is resolved, until we know really what's going on there. So potentially, when the state budget issues are resolved, if it doesn't have a significant impact on us, potentially we could plug that into the Capital Improvement Fund.
Okay, any other questions for Bill? Thank you very much. Okay, we move on to petitions and communications. I have one from Bishop King James Underwood, who is concerned about the Ellis Division sewer problems, but does not wish to speak. Is there anyone else who would like to address the Urbana City Council? Okay, we will move on.
I will address this.
Oh, you want to address? Okay,
Yes,
Aaron Ammons.
I'm trying to lighten up the mood here. I just want to send out happy birthday wishes to some June 1st folks like Carol Ammons. Happy birthday. I hope you're watching, sweetheart. I love you. My Vasilia's birthday is today also, y'all, so y'all can say happy birthday to Vasilia Clark. And my mama's birthday is tomorrow. happy birthday, Mama, and happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there.
Okay, anyone else? All right, we have, I think we do have unfinished business, but we are not going to do it tonight. So, reports of standing committees, the Committee of the Whole. Charlie
Okay.
Smith.
For the Committee of the Whole here. Ordinance number 2015-550, an ordinance amending Urbana City Code, Chapter 22, Section 22-91, tax on... Oops. Print it out. Okay, sorry, I'll read this again. Ordinance number 2015-440, an ordinance amending Urbana City Code, Chapter 14, Section 14-7, regarding schedule of fees, subsections B through P, licenses and permits excluding liquor. This is finance from the Committee of the Whole. I so move.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion by Smythe, seconded by Jacobson. And what did you say the ordinance number is?
2015-440.
Okay, 04040 instead of 05050?
Right, sorry,
Okay.
I
right.
should have brought it up on my computer. This is the, just to speak to it, this is the schedule of fees that we put on file a month ago. So for the committee, I moved it. I don't,
Wait. What I have on my agenda is the food and beverage tax.
That, the agenda's been amended, there's an agenda amended, an
That's easy for you
amended
to say.
agenda that
Okay, I
was
guess I
released today.
would like to have a copy of that then.
I can show you my computer screen.
I'll tell you what, I can bring mine up too. Pass it on, oh, here, this is, okay, pass that on.
Okay, thank you very much. All right. Charlie, there's been a motion by Charlie, seconded by Eric, is that correct? Any discussion? Bill?
Yeah, I sent out an email showing that the Civic Center rental total hasn't really increased over the past few years, even though we raised rent rates about 20 to 30% 2 years ago. So I suggest that we not raise rent rates again on the Civic Center, although I wouldn't be opposed to raising the additional charges like use of stage, and well, that was the only one. We didn't raise video equipment.
So what's number that you want to change?
So I want to leave section M, Civic Center rental, the way it was.
The way it was this year or the year before?
No, the way it currently is.
Okay.
Yeah, with no changes.
Is there, it's an amendment? Is there a second to the amendment?
I'll second that.
Okay, motion by Bill Brown, seconded by, who was first? Okay, Diane was first. That's right. Okay, any discussion on the amendment? How much of a change is it? Okay.
I
Does
can
anybody
speak
else
to
need
that.
an amended agenda?
I
Okay,
can
go
speak to how
ahead.
much of a change it is.
Okay, go ahead.
It's a great change that might generate the same amount of revenue for the city as we had this year.
Was it,
because
I mean,
the more you raise it-
what's the dollar amount is my question.
Well, I guess that's all relative. I don't know.
No, I
what
mean the
ordi-
dollar, the rate change.
I can't speak to that. What I can speak to is less people are renting the facility. So I think it's a
Basic
great idea.
basic economics, right?
So the proposed increases that you're not going to increase, we're going to be around 2,500, but like Bill was saying, he
If
thought.
it doesn't make real revenue, it doesn't matter, right?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So, any other discussion on this? Dennis?
Yeah, so I'd be in favor of it, but you can ask, I would just like to ask, all right, is there any necessary expense that this fee intended to cover?
Not that I'm aware of.
Oh, okay.
No, we have a budget gap, but if we're going to raise a fee and get less revenue, then we're not really addressing the problem. Yes, Diane?
Well, and the bigger picture is the building itself appears to lose $30,000 or $40,000 a year when you look at expenses versus revenue. So that would be a facility that we would include in a facility study to see if it's a space that we're maximizing to the best of its potential, or whether we could repurpose to serve another purpose in the city. So I'd rather look at the $40,000 problem rather than the $2,500 problem.
Okay. So we have motion to amend the motion. All those in favor of the amendment, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, it stands amended. Any other discussion on the motion as amended?
Can I
Beth,
just
go
make
ahead.
sure that you are okay with increasing the use of the stage? To the
Yeah,
20
that,
okay.
that was meant to be
It
in my
was just
amendment.
going to change one of the fees. Okay, any other comments? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan?
No.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
That motion carries. Charlie?
Okay, next up is ordinance number 2015-441, an ordinance amending Urbana City Code, Chapter 14, Section 14-7, regarding the schedule of fees, subsection A, liquor licenses. For the committee, I so move.
Second.
Okay, motion by Smythe, seconded by Eric Jacobson. Mr. Madigan?
I shall recuse myself.
Okay. Any discussion? All those, would the clerk please call the roll? Excuse me.
Okay, Mr. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
That motion carries.
Okay, next up is ordinance number 2015-550, an ordinance amending Urbana City Code, Chapter 22, Section 22-91, tax on purchase of prepared food and certain alcoholic liquor. For the committee, I so move.
Second. Okay, you can take it this time.
Motion by Smythe, seconded by Ammons. Any discussion? There's a lot of discussion. Mr. Madigan first.
I get to recuse myself again.
Okay. Bill Brown?
Yeah, on these that are percentage increases, it just seems to me that we can't keep doing this. I mean, it's like a ratchet wrench. You move it and it won't go back down. It's already, there's built-in inflation into the tax, basically, because people that run restaurants keep raising their prices to match inflation, and our tax revenue goes up. So there's really no reason to have to increase the percent of the tax, except that we didn't plan ahead, or we have something unexpected. And I don't think there was anything that unexpected this year, although there have been in previous years. So, you know, I understand that we need money to make our budget work this year. And I think our cuts this year have been cuts that have basically accumulated over the past year in the form of vacant positions. So apparently our plan to deal with next year's shortfall is to do the same thing. As we accumulate vacant positions, maybe we won't fill them next year. And maybe that's the best we can do without, you know, greater harm. But it just seems like we need to have a plan so that we don't have to keep raising these percentage taxes. I think, you know, it's not going to make a huge difference. I think I calculated my increase for this food and beverage tax will be about $12.50 this year. So I won't go broke. I don't think anybody's going to go broke over it. But if you just keep doing that every year, eventually the government's making more off of the food and beverage than the restaurant is. So I just think we need to do better planning.
Anyone else? Okay, there's a motion by Smythe, seconded by Ammons. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
That motion carries.
Okay, flip over to the next page. Ordinance number 2015-654, An ordinance amending Urbana City Code, Chapter 22, Section 2231, the local motor vehicle fuel tax. For the committee, I so move.
I'll second.
Motion by Smythe, seconded by Roberts. Any discussion? Would the clerk please call the roll? Oh, sorry, didn't see you.
Could you just summarize for the public what the reasoning behind this increase?
Yes. We have a budget gap, and we chose to fill it with taxes that we thought were pretty acceptable to the public. The local motor fuel tax, we have not received any criticism of because people can see the results. This is to fill some of the money that goes from the general fund to road repairs, and we felt since the general fund is under so much pressure that we should instead increase the local motor fuel tax.
Yeah, so and I'll vote for it, but as I understand it, it's to maintain basically the status quo because we're losing, we're not going to transfer something like 180,000
well,
to the
reason we're
capital
not
improvement
transferring it is
Yeah.
because we have this budget gap.
No, I understand.
Yeah.
I understand. I just wanted
Yeah,
to
it's
make
to
sure
fill in the gap.
Just want to make sure people knew the reasoning behind this. I haven't heard a complaint about the local motor fuel tax fund. I think people see where the money is being
Mhm.
spent, and potholes are top on the list of complaints that I get.
Right.
Next to a certain landlord. But
Mike?
So just to kind of follow up on Diane's discussion, yes, this is an increase in the local motor fuel tax, and yes, the money would go to road maintenance and road improvements, but there will be no new money for road maintenance and road improvements. This,
Right.
in essence,
It's
is
changing the source.
this in essence is a de facto increase in the general fund taxes that accumulate to the general fund.
Well, it's a way to keep services that are provided by the
Well,
general fund.
that's one way to look at it, and some here value the services that the city provides more than others. And I think that we ought to call a spade here. The bottom line is that this is just another general tax increase. There is no additional road maintenance or road improvement revenue that's going to be generated from this. It's just for general operating expenses of the city.
Charlie?
Well, it's filling our internal potholes and keeps us from having to lay off police, fire, or more public works personnel. I mean, that's the alternative. You know, as we saw, 72% of our budget is personnel. Those personnel provide the services that we value, and if we don't do something like this, we have to start cutting police and fire. That's the bottom line.
So we have a motion by Smythe, seconded by Roberts. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Any other discussion? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan?
No.
Ms. Marlin?
yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
That motion carries.
Next up is ordinance 2015-655, an ordinance amending Urbana City Code, Chapter 22, Section 22-45.1, the municipal gas use tax. For the committee, I so move.
I'll second.
Motion by Smythe, seconded by Roberts. Any discussion? Mr. Madigan?
So it won't be any surprise that I'm going to oppose this one as well, because this ultimately, I know everybody thinks that these large concerns will just somehow eat this and shrink their bottom line, but that's certainly not the case. It certainly won't be the case with the school district. And we don't apparently even know who some of these other large customers are, but we can, venture a guess. And they will figure out a way to make citizens pay the freight. The main reason that I'm opposed to this, as well as these other tax and fee increases, is less about the tax and fee increases themselves. It's more about the process we're engaged in here. And these are, in essence, a fait accompli. We have a system this year of we have a budget process this year that has the cart before the horse. We just tonight have had our first serious reviews of departmental budgets, and yet we are in the final passage stage of revenue increases to fund those budgets. I'm not saying that that everyone here hasn't taken seriously their job of trying to find efficiencies and savings in their budgets. But we don't really know. We haven't been able to explore these things in any kind of serious detail. But here we are passing the revenues to get there, to fund something that was just literally put on our desks within the last few days. I just find that process really problematic. I understand that there were a lot of pressures this year, but that just doesn't, does not justify the process that we're going through right now in putting the revenue in front of the budget exercise. That is just not that is not good business. So, I mean, that is my main objection. It is less about what is before us and more about the process by which we got here.
Anyone else? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan?
No.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
That motion carries. Mr. Smythe.
Next item is ordinance number 2015-656, an ordinance amending Urbana City Code, Chapter 22, Section 22-61, the hotel motel use tax. For the committee, I so move.
Second.
Motion by Smythe, seconded by Marlin. And this is the one that has the revision that was made at the Committee of the Whole. The agreement is being produced, and it will be brought back to the council for your approval or your revision. Diane.
I just wanted to say that there is a little bit of a silver lining on this one. I believe that the fact that the city is heading toward rejoining the regional recreation and tourism promotion efforts with Visit Champaign County is a very positive, and it's going to be a very productive step. And as we asked last week, the money, the $10,000 will be put in a line item in the budget. It won't be contributed to the organization until we have an agreement in place that's satisfactory. So I think that satisfies most people's concerns, and I look forward to supporting this.
Dennis?
And this weekend, I was approached by somebody, a local business person, as I walked on the street, and they congratulated the city council and the mayor for allowing that to happen and to rejoining the larger community of the Convention and Visitors Bureau, or however it's called today.
Okay. Mike?
I would say that that is the certainly a redeeming quality of this tax increase. It's not enough to make me support it, but I do think it is important to acknowledge that we should be participating in that. And but I am concerned about the differential that this does create with the city of Champaign. I know that a lot of people say that you know, a couple of bucks a night per room does not make a big difference to most people who are booking. But you just kind of have to wonder if somebody's booking 100 rooms or 200 rooms, whether or not they would look at that or not.
Anyone else? Charlie?
Yeah, I have to come back to the same issues as before. Is you know, this is I think my 15th budget or something like that I've looked at, and yes, there have been changes over time, but there have been very few changes over the last 5 years, and what I see is a budget that tries to maintain the status quo. That status quo being to keep as many police and firefighters on the streets as we can, to keep as many potholes patched as we can, and short of doing these steps that are a package of increases, we would have to cut fire and police. And so if you value that under 4-minute response time by our EMS trained staff, if you value the patrols on the street and the response to high crime areas as they're called for, then we need to keep the numbers of people that we have employed by the city at the rate that we've had for the last several years. So I will continue to make that as the counter to Mr. Madigan's comments.
Eric?
As someone who's just been going over the social service requests in the final social service budget, I think the other thing that we do, and I think it's absolutely essential and absolutely appropriate, is we work to keep the lives of our citizens patched.
Okay. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan?
No.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
That motion carries.
And the last item from the Committee of the Whole is Resolution Number 2015-526R, a resolution approving the capital improvement plan for the City of Urbana. For the committee, I so move.
Second.
Motion by Smythe, seconded by Ammons. Any discussion?
Mayor?
Charlie?
Yeah, I would just remind folks that if they want to know what capital improvements are in the works for the next year or two, this is the document. This year's is the green cover. I believe copies are available in the library, probably at Public Works, and I know it's available online as well. So if you want to know when your street's getting done, whether it's this year or 70 years from now, which is the next time I'll see my street paved, here's the document you need.
Okay, we have a motion. Oh, Bill Brown, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thanks for that. For the capital improvement plan, it's probably one of the documents I refer to most from constituent inquiries as far as when something's going to be done or if something's going to be done. It really helps to be able to say, yes, it's planned for 3 years from now. And, you know, even though it's not tomorrow, that seems to really help a lot. So thanks.
Okay. Mike?
Sorry, Aaron. Quick question for Bill. So how much of the capital improvement plan is predicated upon the tax and fee increases that are being approved here this evening? I'm sorry, Elizabeth?
I'm going to say about the 180,000. I think that was the figure for the local motor fuel tax. I don't have it in front of me at the minute, but that part of it.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, anyone else? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
That motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Madigan. Okay, reports of special committees. I don't think we have any, do we? Reports of officers. The 911 bill passed, and it has 87 cents, but there are other things in it that are pretty good. But the lobbyists for the phone company said that they didn't want to have to deal with 102 different rates, but they're now dealing with two. They're dealing with $3.90 for Chicago and 87 cents for the rest of the state. And the $300,000 that Champaign County MetCad's going to get is not really new revenue. We haven't increased revenue. Our revenue has declined in real terms over the last 20 years or 30 years. And it's only to partially make up for some of the future loss, so it's not really an addition. So I will be going and talking with the AT&T lobbyists and suggesting that perhaps if they can cope with 2 different rates, they might be able to cope with 4 different rates, and maybe we can get some increases for local governments that really can't function that well with 87 cents. Anyone else? Anyway, I think their computer systems are great, and they could do 102, they could do 204 different rates, but they wouldn't get that many. So, okay. Under new business, we have ordinance number 2015-06-057, an ordinance approving a major variance to allow an increase in the height of a monument sign to 8 feet in the city's CRE Conservation Recreation Education District at 505 West Stoughton Street. And we have...
I'll introduce myself. I'm Lori Pearson, new planning manager. Max is doing the brunt of the presentation, but I thought since I haven't met all of you, it'd probably be a good idea to sit in front of you and introduce myself.
Thank you very much.
Good evening. So in this case, the Urbana Park District is requesting a major variance for a sign that will be 8 feet tall at the Phillips Recreation Center. And let me pull up the memo here. So just a quick little overview of the background information. The Recreation Center, which is that property that has the gradient there, is surrounded by a wide range of land uses, including residential and commercial uses. To the south and east, it is surrounded by business-related zoning, while to the north and west, it is surrounded by residential zones. And lastly, on Exhibit C, we see that the subject property is designated for campus mixed use in the comprehensive plan. Exhibit F of the memo is a picture of a current sign that is found on the south frontage of the Recreation Center. This sign is located about roughly halfway down the block. It's double-sided, internally illuminated, and it encroaches 4 feet into the public right-of-way and is 6 feet 11 inches tall, which is 11 inches over the allowed height of 6 feet. The Park District has found that due to the curvature of Springfield Avenue and the presence of parking along the north side of the street, that the existing sign is not very visible to passing motorists. And this problem is really illustrated in the next page of Exhibit F, which I can get to with this button. And here we are looking east down Springfield Avenue, and we see the sign is tucked over here to the left, and it is difficult to see for passing motorists. And keep in mind that this picture is taken when you're elevated on top of a Google Maps truck even, and it's still hard to see. The Park District proposes to replace this existing sign with a new sign. The sign is shown in the rendering just above. So here's the rendering of the sign. The sign will have an electronic message board. On November 17th of last year, Council approved Ordinance 2014-11-106, which allows for digital signs in the CRE district, and which applies all established sign regulations to such signs. Similar to the existing sign, this new sign will be located roughly halfway down the block, and will continue to project east and west. This will ensure that light from the sign does not project into any nearby structures. The new sign would be 8 feet tall, representing a 33% variance from the allowed height of 6 feet. This is the major variance that the Park District is requesting. To note, the new sign would also reduce the existing nonconformity in sign setback from 50% to 25%, which represents a minor variance. On May 20th of this year, the ZBA approved that minor variance. The proposed sign would meet all requirements of the Urbana zoning, all other requirements of the Urbana zoning ordinance, and it is not expected to have a negative impact on the surrounding area. It will be utilized to promote the Park District's events and programs. The Park District believes that this new sign will enhance wayfinding along Springfield Avenue, as well as improve visibility for its programming. Moving on to the criteria for a variance. 1, are there special circumstances or special practical difficulties with reference to the parcel concerned in carrying out the ordinance? And no, yes, the curvature of Springfield Avenue, along with the presence of on-street parking, impedes the visibility of the existing sign. The proposed sign will enhance visibility and is in closer conformance with current setback regulations. 2, the proposed variance will not serve as a special privilege. The proposed sign will enhance visibility for the Park District's programming. The unique placement of the Phillips Rec Center along Springfield Avenue provides an important opportunity for the Park District to promote itself and enhance wayfinding. 3, the variance requested was not the result of a situation knowingly created by the petitioner. The Urbana Park District has maintained the Phillips Rec Center since 1996, and during that time, has not modified the site or its bordering rights-of-way. 4, the variance will not alter the character of the neighborhood. The new sign will replace a double-sided illuminated sign. The new sign will be set back an additional 2 feet from the right-of-way and continues to project east and west. 5, the variance will not cause a nuisance. By being oriented to the east and west and located roughly halfway down the block, the proposed sign will not create a nuisance for nearby users. And lastly, 6, the variance represents generally the minimum deviation from requirements that is necessary. The proposed sign is only designed to the extent that it will ensure improved visibility for the Urbana Park District's programs and events. In this case, council has the following options. You may approve the variance as requested. You may approve the variance along with certain terms and conditions. If council elects to add conditions, I ask that you articulate those conditions. And C, council may deny the variance request. If you elect to do so, I ask that you articulate why. On May 20th of this year, the ZBA unanimously recommended approval of the major variance to council. Staff concurs. Thank you.
Any questions? Diane?
I'd move approval of ordinance number 2015-06-057.
Second.
Motion by Marlin, seconded by Ammons. Any discussion? Dennis?
Not a true objection, but I just want to make a observation. The signs, the first line of the signs, excessive letter spacing does bother me. And it could be solved by either centering the first word on the top line or expanding the set width of the characters so that they better fill up the gap spaces between the lettering, which, especially between the L and the L, begins to make the word less than readable.
Charlie?
You know, that actually, I would agree with Dennis. Now that I look at it, it would look much better just centered. My comment is related to the foot candles. We had been discussing a 0.25 level with respect to large billboards, and probably doesn't imply, it's probably not quite so important with these smaller ones, but if we were to, if we ever get back to digital billboards and a 0.25 foot candle, I would think that we'd want to be consistent. How would we go about, would we just simply change the other ordinance that we approved back in 2014 to reduce it to 0.25, and would everybody have to conform, or how would that work?
If council desires a change to be consistent, we can certainly look at that. But it would require changing the previous ordinance if that's what you, if that's the direction you wanted to go.
Okay, so we could actually say 0.25 for this particular sign if we wanted to. Is that correct?
That is a condition. The petitioner is here to see if they would be able to comply with that.
We would have to check with our manufacturer factory and make sure it's doable. We currently have a contract in place for this sign based upon the previous ordinance. We have to see if we can comply with it.
Yeah, I assume it's just, if it's like the digital signs that we were shown, those are very adjustable by software. So I'm not too worried about it if we decide to go down in the future. So I have no problem with this ordinance as it is.
Eric?
As long as people are expressing opinions about the rendering, I would suggest that the Urbana Park District lettering on the brickwork be larger. I can just see, and I am really serious about this, I could just see somebody driving along with my particular level of eyesight and saying, there's something there, what does that say? I had crash. So I think to make that lettering more legible, just make it larger, I think is a good idea.
Anyone else? Okay, we have a motion by Marlin, seconded by Ammons. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
That motion carries.
Thank you.
Next is ordinance number 2015-06-058, an ordinance approving a major variances to allow a change in the required front yard setback from 15 feet to 5 feet at 202 West University Avenue in the B3 General Business Zoning District.
Good evening. I'll try to keep this concise. So this is a request for two variances for a property at 202 West University. The first variance is for a change in the required front yard setback from 15 feet to 5 feet. The other variance is a request for major variance to allow parking spaces in which the exiting vehicle must back out into a public street. Just to give a quick synopsis of the request, this is at 202 West University. It's the B3 General Business District. It's a space that is mostly commercial in nature. It's a partially vacant building that is also partially occupied by a hair salon. To the west, there's a clinic. To the east, across the street, there's a office space as well. In the rear, there are single-family homes, and across the street, you also have vacant lot, more commercial space as well. Zone B3 to the rear is zoned R5, and then the other neighboring parcels are zoned B3 as well. In the future land use map, it's zoned community business with central business zoned across the street. So the petitioner is requesting permit. The petitioner would like to demolish the existing building that exists on site and construct a new building in a somewhat similar footprint that is overall smaller but more compliant with the existing site. They would propose to put a principal use gaming facility, a gaming hall in the front, which is allowed by right within the B3 district. In the rear, they would propose to put general commercial office space as well, which use has yet to be determined. Just to quickly review the site, you'll see that it's a site with several existing legal nonconformities because of the building's construction before the current zoning ordinance was put into place. There are issues with the parking that you'll see. That is the southbound edge of the property. That's right. It has parking as well as a curb cut right near University and Race where they intersect, which is somewhat of a problematic issue for the property. You also see that it's within the required setback towards the west side of the property. That's an example of a car exiting onto University right there, also on the south edge of the property. So the petitioner is requesting to demolish the existing building and build one that is more compliant with setbacks that are compliant on the west, south, and north edges of the parcel. They're requesting a variance for the east side of the parcel, which is the bottom of the diagram right here. They're requesting that in the B3 zoning district, table 6.3 requires a 15-foot front yard setback. They're requesting to change that to 5 feet. And the main reason for that is to accommodate parking. The existing parking required for a video gaming facility and for the commercial office space would be 8 spaces. The petitioner has requested that he be allowed to install 11 to first meet the general parking requirements of the off-street parking requirements of the proposed use, but also because of the very limited availability of on-street parking in the surrounding neighborhood, especially along Race, and to accommodate the patrons or tenants of their facility, and to make it, and also just for safety purposes, to not have people who would be headed to either of those spaces having to park across the street and cross a busy street or et cetera. So upon our review, because the overall structure represents an improvement on the property, the proposal would eliminate the curb cut that is along University Avenue, would eliminate the parking along University Avenue as well. It would bring the building to within a more compliant nature as well. The request is to maintain only 2 existing legal nonconformities. So overall, the variances are part of a proposal that would be to improve the existing site of the condition of the site. I just want to briefly mention that on the north part of the parcel, you will see that there are 3 parking spaces that would extend into an alley. Those are, as proposed, those parking spaces are compliant. The setback of the building would be greater than it is now. So in the rear of the building, there would be more space than that would allow cars to exit in and exit out than currently provided as well. The other variance that is in correspondence with the request to reduce the required front yard setback for Ray Street is to allow cars to install parking that allows cars to exit onto a public street. That currently isn't allowed in Section 8.4, Article 8, Section 4.3 of the zoning ordinance, or I'm sorry, Part E of the zoning ordinance. But it would be required because the petitioner is asking us to put it in because the site is very narrow, very small. Meeting all the other required setbacks give very little space where parking is allowed to be met. In our internal reviews, our staff reviews of the proposed plans, it's been met with approval from both our Public Works Department and our Community Development Department because it represents an overall improvement on the site, especially with the elimination of the curb cut and movement of traffic near University Avenue. So just to quickly go over, the variance criteria, are there special circumstances or special practical difficulties with reference to the parcel concerned in carrying out the strict application of the ordinance? The narrow lot size with 2 front yard setbacks, as I had mentioned, makes providing parking and any sort of development on that site difficult to accomplish. And the variances are just to meet parking needs and continue to nonconformities that already exist. Does the proposed variance, the proposed variance will not serve as a special privilege because the variance requested is necessary due to special circumstances relating to the land or structure involved or to be used for occupancy thereof, which is not generally applicable to other lands or structures in the same district. The setback and parking requirements in B3 are prohibitive for most new development on the property. Almost approximately 40% of the parcel is restricted from being built upon because of the setback requirements, so they would not create any new special circumstances for the property. The variance requested was not the result of a situation or condition having been knowingly or deliberately created by the petitioner. It's of our staff's opinion that that's not the case. The variances would be consistent with existing conditions on the site, and it would also eliminate existing nonconformities. It would bring the number of nonconformities down. The variance will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood. Again, it's improving the condition of the building and not worsening any existing condition. And lastly, the variance will not cause a nuisance to the adjacent property. I guess it's worth mentioning that there was a letter of protest filed by the residents directly north who abutted the alley that was right north of the proposed site. The petitioners did show up at the ZBA meeting, and they did have, before the meeting, amicable conversations with the petitioner to the point where they said that their concerns were addressed, that they did not feel the need to, they declined the invitation to speak during the hearing as well. So I think it would be safe to assume that their concerns are, I'm not sure if they're here this evening, but I don't think they are. But so I think it's safe to assume that their concerns were mostly answered with conversation with the petitioner. So I included that as for reference, but just to address that particular question. And then the last one is the variance represents generally the minimum deviation from the requirements of the zoning ordinance necessary to accommodate the request. It meets the closest that a setback can be placed with putting in the parking stalls that are required by the zoning ordinance as well. And generally speaking, it meets the minimum amount of parking spaces that are required for the proposed uses without going much further than that. The Zoning Board of Appeals heard both cases on May 20th, and they voted unanimously for approval of both variances. They had some minor questions about the specific conditions of the site existing and what the future would be, future conditions would be if the parcel or if the variances were approved. Just some questions about the width of the alley as well as the concerns of the neighbors, but obviously the neighbors were able to resolve any concerns they had with the petitioner. So with the Zoning Board of Approval recommended 4 ayes, 0 nays, and both variances to approval, the council has 3 options. They can approve the variances based on the outline. They may reject them with terms and conditions, or they may deny the variance. The variance forwarded was recommended with the following conditions: that the site is developed in general compliance with the site plan submitted by the petitioner, and that the parking space and curb cut along University Avenue are eliminated as proposed in the submitted site plan. I should also mention there was one other, technically it's a letter of protest submitted by an individual who is in an alleged ownership dispute with the listed property owner. It's mostly a civil matter, and the tax records that are available to community development staff only do not list the individual who filed the letter of protest. Only William Foster is the only individual that's listed to us as the property owner as well, and so there were some concerns about that, but it does not inhibit the ability of the petitioner to request the variances that we are hearing tonight for their potential option to purchase the site. So mentioning that out of due diligence, but otherwise, the petitioners are here if you had any questions that you'd like to ask them as well. I think they might want an opportunity to briefly speak regarding the matter, but if you had any questions for us.
Charlie?
Race Street was repaved, is that correct? It's now cement all the way to Park Street? It's no longer brick?
I think so. I'm not certain. Let me see.
So I know the property to the east of this was replaced as it's a law firm. Yeah.
Yes. I can't tell how freshly paved that is, but it looks new. Yeah.
Did you want to say something, Dennis? Oh, Dennis has a question.
Yeah. Well, I guess I'm surprised you're going to tear the building down. Actually, it's an improvement, I'm sure, but that's pretty positive. And it's I like the idea that they're going to close off the parking facing University. That obviously is a lot more dangerous to back into or to leave parking spaces there than it would be to exit the property onto Ray Street, which is just 1 block long and is pretty much residential as far as its traffic level goes. Should this be built, who would determine what kind of signage is allowed on this building and where it would be placed?
Well, it'd be signage that still would be required to meet the requirements of the B3 district. We hadn't had any extensive conversations with the applicant about any deviations from signage that's required in the zoning ordinance, but
Currently, the building that has signs on it now has them mounted on the wall facing University. And I'm just wondering if there's going to be a green space introduced in front of the building on the south side. Would we expect to see a monument sign there? Would that be allowed? I don't know if it would be or not.
well, there are set. I think there are requirements of, if I remember correctly, because we were dealing with another monument sign a little up the road. It's still, I think, required within. I don't think that within that front yard it could be closer than 8 feet, because it's already towards University. Which side of the building were you asking about again?
The south side facing University.
Okay. Yeah, that's already about as closely put towards the right-of-way as it can be without extending into the required side yard or required front yard. But any signs that they did have to install would be required. The existing signage is, if it is a nonconformity, it would lose that status because it's a complete tear down and rebuild.
Right.
So.
Okay, I guess it'll just come before the Community Development Office and it would probably be administratively approved. If it's conforming, there would be no problem. Okay, just wondering. Thank you.
Sure.
Bill?
I was reading in the material that someone said that this was a former dry cleaner site. Is that right? Do you know? Right.
Possible. I didn't come across that, and I didn't come across that past use in any conversations that I had regarding the site. But
do you know if it was, would they be required to do any kind of cleanup there, or just does it depend on the use that it's going to be? It depends on what it's going to be used for, and this is probably pretty sealed, so it wouldn't be a major cleanup.
And it's also nothing that's beyond the covered in our building permit process too. So for proper environmental.
And then there's also mention that the hair boutique had a long-term lease. If they decided to lease here in that commercial office space, would there be enough parking for that? Just as an example.
Well, they did have more required parking than is currently available under the required spaces. There are 3 additional spaces required for that. I would have to quickly check what the parking requirements for a hair salon would be.
But the idea basically is that the extra space in the back or in the north side is just undesignated commercial office space general.
Yeah,
and that's how you calculate the parking requirement.
Yeah.
I don't need to do the math on this one. It's fine. Personal service is one space for every 250 square feet.
So 4.
They have an abundance of 3 spaces, and the space is about 1,100 square feet. And they had already allocated 4 spaces to that site, if I recall correctly.
Okay. And then finally, just I was a little confused because at one point it said essentially the same footprint, but then I think somebody testified that the building would be 30% smaller.
Yeah. What was meant by the verbiage? I apologize if that was confusing. What I meant by the approximately same footprint was that the same shape and size, so to speak, but it is somewhat smaller in that sense.
So on the north side, would the setback be about 7 feet less than what it is now? Does that sound about right? 6 or 7 feet?
Yeah, it would be compliant with the setback requirements we have for that district.
Okay.
Because it's considered a front yard.
Okay, thanks.
Aaron?
I did have some questions for the applicants.
Certainly.
Thank you for that. Appreciate it. How you doing?
Hello, I'm Carl Minch.
Carl. How nice to meet you, Carl.
Nice to meet you.
Do you guys currently have a gaming hall already or another similar operation?
We do, in Decatur, Illinois.
In Decatur. I'm a little concerned about the, I don't know if, Diane, you have raised one of these before, but I'm not exactly sure where all the other gaming halls are in close proximity to residential areas. Do we have some others that are in close proximity like this one would be?
This is Zone B3, so it's in the right zone.
Right, I understand that, but I'm saying right behind it is residential apartments and all this stuff come right in. There's a park right there, and I'm saying is that, do we have any others that are similarly situated as that?
Charlie?
Well, I would think that the ones on University Avenue, the newest one being where
Lacey's?
Lacey's, yeah. So you've got that right
Yeah.
on the opposite, right adjacent to the
Cash.
park, essentially.
Behind
And
Jimmy
so
John's.
behind that
Poplar.
is
In the,
the
Yeah.
Crystal Lake neighborhood.
okay, thank you.
Sure. Any other questions?
Any other questions? Okay, Charlie?
I'll just make a motion approving, put the page down here. I'll just move approval of this ordinance.
I'll second.
Motion by Smythe, seconded by Roberts. Any other discussion?
Find the page.
Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
That motion carries. And there being no further business, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.